Our story starts in news in Babylon City. The Black Dragon Guild appeared to take over the tower floor. They planned to show off the top-level guild skills, but unfortunately, they came back empty-handed once again. The reporter said that this time, the Black Dragon was forced to experience another fiasco. They were able to be bypassed by the shining protagonist of today's first-rank hunter. He said that the hunter nicknamed Summer Spirit had once again defeated the boss single-handedly. The reporter approached him. He was delighted with him that he was able to once again unhindered by the divine record. The Summer Spirit listened to him without much interest. The reporter was ecstatic that he was still the only person who was able to single-handedly kill the monster boss in the tower that appeared. The reporter wished he could share with him and his viewers how he managed to defeat the boss, but the Summer Spirit tired of listening to him, snatching the microphone from his hands. He was not happy to communicate with him. He said that first of all he wanted his nickname changed. He didn't want to be Summer Spirit, but the reporter didn't understand what he meant. The hero started yelling at the reporter, saying that he didn't like being nicknamed the Summer Spirit. The nickname offended him, but everyone around him only said it. Watching the hero's interview, the young guy sitting on the bed envied him a lot. He heard the hero promising to find the person who gave him that nickname and straighten him out, but he still envied him. He envied a life where he could say anything he wanted. He sat on his phone and chatted with other players. He wrote only one phrase, that he wanted to be just like the hero. People in the chat discussed the bad character of the hero. They also discussed his personal life. But the young guy did not pay attention to this, and again wrote the same thing. He wanted to become like him. The guy did not pay attention to other messages. He was not interested in what other people wrote about him. He wrote all the time the same thing. And then the chat asked the question, who was this guy who wrote the same thing? He kept listening to his interview where he was yelling at the poor reporter. He wanted to be called by his first name. And then the guy remembered that the hero was still insanely rich, and he became even more jealous of him. The guy thought that if this world was a novel, then probably someone like Summer Spirit would definitely be the main character there. He thought he was the best hunter of all. He realized that he was only good enough to be an auxiliary hunter, and that he couldn't even make it to auxiliary. And then he heard the reporter ask him to finish by saying a few words to the audience. The reporter said that there were dreamers in their world that he had inspired to accomplish in the hunting field and called him by his name, Yusuha, so he wouldn't be nervous and could give some advice to the viewers. He continued and said that he had shown real skill as soon as he entered the tower in his early 20 seconds. It didn't even take him a month to defeat the monster boss that no one had been able to kill for whole years. The correspondent noticed that there were many legends surrounding his identity. He asked the man to share the secret of his success with the dreamers. He asked him to say just a few words. The hero calmed down and agreed to give some advice. Then the young guy sat down and started listening to his advice very carefully. The hero asked to listen to him carefully as he would say just a few words. He became serious, handed over the microphone, and looking directly into the camera, said that if a person was destined to succeed, it would be so anyway. It was necessary not to stop, and everything would come with time. The hero added that even if they had succeeded, so they wouldn't even think of crossing his path otherwise, he would have killed them. He turned around and walked away. The reporter tried to find out what his words meant, but he didn't say another word. The guy didn't listen to what the reporter kept saying. He closed his laptop, and with tears in his eyes said that he was hurt that the interview was over. He went to the wall where there were newspaper clippings with the hero, and he couldn't understand why he allowed himself to neglect people. He realized that he did that not to him but to the reporter. But for him, there was no difference. The boy thought that if he had such talent, he wouldn't have to squat in a one-room shack, and he certainly wouldn't be pestered by useless F-level hunters. Tearing the newspapers off the wall, he started shouting that he wished he could be like him. He was very jealous of him. He wanted to become successful because of his talent. The guy thought that at the very least it would be nice if the skills that the Summer Spirit had were his, and then he would be able to succeed. But suddenly he saw a bright light in the window. He got up to see what was happening, and a map appeared in front of him before he had only seen such a thing on video. In front of him was a golden skill card. He couldn't believe it. He had gotten the skill of ugly envy, a similar case that was hard to find. He cried with happiness. The system notification told him that the tower was encouraged by his achievement. The guy remembered that he had never seen such a skill gain in the video. The guy thought he had been looking forward to this moment since he got to this place. He noticed that the card was gold, which meant that this skill was above S level. He grabbed the card and the card creation began, he read. The effect automatically triggered when he died at the hands of an enemy that would kill him, and the skill was copied to him, but he had to die to do so. The guy read the terms of the skill was shocked. He didn't understand how the skill worked. All he had in his head was that he had to die. He didn't even think that there were such skills. He remembered that once there was a tower in their world. It was so big that it could be seen beyond the horizon line anywhere on Earth. People who had nothing to lose were the first to enter it. Where on each floor of the tower awaited a large number of monsters that came to them from different worlds, and only a select few the tower granted a special skill. People who were on the verge of death could get the skill and survive the battle with the monster, but some simply died inside the tower. People who found out about everything began to gather in the tower and began to hunt monsters. Everyone wanted to get the coveted skill from the tower. They tried to kill as many monsters as possible to climb to the top floors. The guy was incredibly impressed when he first saw the summer spirit hunting. He thought he was a real genius. He wasn't afraid of monsters and could easily overpower them. He was a virtuoso at destroying them. The press interviewed the citizens to find out what they thought of the hero. They all said that his weapon was a flaming spear and he danced with it. He stood out among the other hunters. It was as if he was the very embodiment of Shiva. One man was watching an interview on TV with people who were saying forced words about the hero. Then the guy asked him to turn on something else. He couldn't stand talking about the hunter anymore, but the man said he was interested in listening. He was surprised that he didn't like the summer spirit, but the guy said that wasn't the case at all. The guy had heard people say that the hero was ranked number 1 and was happy about it. They thought he didn't have an ounce of guile in him. The guy lay on the bar stool and couldn't believe that there was such a life too. He thought his life was hopelessly insignificant, and he couldn't change it. He told the man that he had gotten a skill yesterday that was above S level. The man wouldn't listen to him and thought he was just another alcoholic who had no one to talk to. The guy added that the skill was of no use. You could only die with it. He revealed that he had not even declared to the Hunters Association that he had gotten such a skill. He explained to the man that he didn't report to the association just because he was ashamed to even talk about the skill and laughed hard. Then the man kicked him outside thinking he had too much to drink. The guy went outside and the system showed him an updated hero ranking where Summer Spirit was in first place. The sun blinded him and then he decided to sit down. He had a bad headache and felt bad. He heard familiar voices coming from around the corner. He cautiously walked over to see what was going on. He saw a girl asking the hero to get away from her. She didn't understand what had gotten into him. The summer spirit looked at her and told her that he was impressed with her not bad acting. He told her that anyone would have mistaken her for a defenseless person. He told her that that glass of alcohol she had given him had poison in it, the stomach juice of a basilisk. He realized that she had planned to poison him with it. The girl was very much frightened when he showed her the vial of poison. The summer spirit threw the vial and it shattered. He then approached her and told her that if it wasn't for his skill there might have been a disaster and she would have been able to achieve the results she wanted. The girl replied that it was a misunderstanding and that she didn't mean anything like that. She said that she only wanted to take the tower with him, to which the hero replied that he thought so too before, but only it didn't happen. The guy sat and listened. He tried not to make a sound. He could hear her begging him to discuss the problem and assured him it was a misunderstanding. He remembered that everyone thought they were dating, but now it was like a showdown with her. Summer Spirit grabbed her by the throat and told her that the discussion option was fine with him. He said that politeness was always a good thing. He informed her that he would set the rules of this conversation. The guy hand tried to hide his breathing. He wanted to go unnoticed by them. He noticed that it was more like the dialogue of a man who was about to kill and a man who didn't want to die. The Summer Spirit said that he asked the questions. She could only move her head and answer. He told her that he had the skill to recognize lies and she wouldn't be able to fool him. He said that if she was honest with him, he would give her the antidote. He asked her just one question he was interested in: who sent to kill him. He asked it was the Black Dragon Witch. The girl, hearing this, became very scared and nervous. She nodded sadly, thus confirming that it was the witch who sent her to kill him, but she failed to poison him, to which the hero replied that he knew it was her. But the Summer Spirit lied to her when he found out the truth. He wished her a happy journey and killed her. He mercilessly burned her, not keeping his word. The guy seeing this was very scared and did not know what to do. The guy turned around and started to run away quickly from that place. He didn't see him as a hero now. He thought he was a ruthless killer. He thought he was just an ordinary psychopath. He decided that he had to get away quickly before the summer spirit discovered him, and as he was running away he didn't notice and stepped on the bottles, thus creating unnecessary noise. He felt the summer spirit already behind him. The guy heard him say that he thought he had already dealt with all the enemies in the city, and then he felt the killer's gaze on him. The hero was already ready to launch a fire attack on the fleeing guy. At that moment the guy realized that the girl was not the first. He was very scared. He was terrified to imagine how many people the summer spirit had killed. Maybe it was dozens or hundreds of people. While running away he fell and hurt his leg. Now he wouldn't be able to escape from that place. The summer wind smilingly asked him where he was in such a hurry. He was holding his fire spear. The guy seeing him started begging him for mercy. He wanted to live, so he asked to be spared. The hero asked if he had seen what happened between him and the girl, to which the guy, all in tears, nervously shouted that he saw nothing, absolutely nothing. He was incredibly scared. He was shaking with fear. He slowly approached him, leaned over and asked him again what he didn't see. The hero knew the guy wouldn't be able to get away from him. He was completely calm. The hero suddenly grabbed him by the throat and told him that not only was he calling him an unloved nickname, he was also claiming he hadn't seen anything. But he hadn't asked anything specific of him yet. He couldn't write it off as his fantasy. He told him that if he didn't want to follow the girl and get killed, then he had to answer his question of who sent him. He suspected it was from the Black Dragon. At that moment the guy couldn't believe it was the one he admired. The guy asked him to believe that no one had sent him, and he was there completely by accident. He remembered that the hero had said he had a lie recognition skill. He asked him to believe that he really didn't know anything. The hero was greatly surprised to hear these words from the guy. He told him that about this skill he lied to her. Then the guy was horrified to realize that the hero had killed her without any proof of her guilt. He was shocked that he killed her just because he suspected something. Then the hero nervously flipped him off and told him not to tell on other people. His words caught the hero. The summer spirit explained to him that he had figured out that she was seriously going to kill him, and if he didn't kill her, then she would have killed him by tomorrow. But the guy wanted to know why he was so sure of that. He said that he just knew everything and he had a special method. But judging by the fact that he was willing to pass any lie test, the hero decided that he was out of it and didn't know anything. The guy calmed down and thanked him for believing him. The summer spirit wasn't going to let him go. He told him that he had seen too much and could tell someone about it, and the hero couldn't let that happen. So he put his hand on his head and killed him with his fire. At that moment the boy remembered his childhood when the director told him about the origin of his name, Kim Kanja. It meant young master. He asked him to live up to that name and become an outstanding person, and after that Kim Kanja died. Kim Kanja, after his death, was in a strange place where he was lying on the floor. He was thinking why he had to die like that. He wanted some more time. He wanted to live, and then he noticed that a golden skill card appeared in front of him. The system offered him to choose a skill card. He reached for it and wished he had one more chance. Just one more chance? He grabbed the card, thus choosing a skill. He woke up again in his apartment lying on his bed. He didn't understand what had happened and why he was alive. He heard again the same news he had watched in the morning. He was confused and didn't know what was going on. Kim quickly jumped out of bed and looked around him. He couldn't believe he was alive. He remembered perfectly how the hero had killed him, but now he was home again. He wanted to figure out what was wrong. He got out of bed and tried to figure out how come he was back in his house and alive. He thought he was going crazy. Everything was very strange to him. Kim decided to check his phone. He logged into the chat room and was horrified to realize that people were writing all the same things that had happened yesterday. He was really worried, and it was making him sweat. He remembered exactly that the summer spirit had killed him. He didn't doubt it, but he couldn't understand why he was still alive. He remembered grabbing the skill card after his death, and then he decided to check something out. Kim reached out his hand and decided to check the skill card he had gotten after his death. He noticed that he had gotten one rare but not very good skill. He got a skill the effect of which was copy one of the skills of the enemy that killed him and made that skill his. He couldn't believe he copied that skill when he was dying. Kim read that the skill took him back 24 hours, but his memory and skills remained unchanged. This skill was known as rebirth. He then realized that this skill was wielded by the legendary hunter Summer Spirit. He remembered his words that he knew everything and that he had a method to detect lies. That was why the girl had died. In fact, she was able to poison him 24 hours ago, but the skill brought him back to life. Kim was angry that after killing the girl, the Summer Spirit had killed him too. Even though it was not his fault, he had a wild desire to kill the hero he admired so much. He went to the kitchen, and he could still hear his interview in which he warned everyone not to cross him or death would await them. Kim was determined that he would get revenge on him for killing innocent people with impunity, he thought. Now they would see who would die this time, but suddenly he heard screams coming from the street. People were shouting that there was a fire in the city and they needed to put it out immediately. Kim looked out the window and saw a building burning not far away from him. He decided to go outside and see what was going on. When he left the house, he saw people carrying water to the fire. He decided to follow them. They needed to put out the flames. Kim realized that he lived in a different place from the outside world. In this town, there were people who wanted to become real hunters. He saw that the first floor of the tower was on fire. He took out his phone and thought that now was the moment. He looked at the time and realized that he was drinking at the bar at the time. He realized that the Summer Spirit had started the fire in an attempt to hide all the evidence. Kim ran to the fire where the hunters had already started to put out the flames. He heard someone asking the water elemental hunters not to put out the fire all at once. They needed to direct the water all together and at the same time. He noticed that there was a black dragon guild that temporarily took over the leadership and asked them to follow their orders. This guild was second in rank. The head of the guild was a black witch. The master of alchemy shouted that the isolation of the neighborhood was complete and that all the trouble was with the survivors who remained inside the building. They decided to send a rescue team there. The captain of the town's vigilantes, Holy Knight, informed them that there was no need to send a rescue team. She explained that the place had been empty for 5 years and they had been very lucky in that. Kim knew that this city had many names. Some called it Babylon. Some called it the city of the first floor. Some called it the city of elevation. But the point was always the same. Once in the city, you could never get out. He realized that all the locals were used to emergencies. He heard amongst the crowd as the guild heads discussed the girl who was killed by the Summer Spirit. They were shocked that she didn't show up. She wasn't the type to be late for something like this. The Holy Knight said she had business to attend to today and suggested it could have been a date. She said she and the Summer Spirit had gotten very close lately. The Master of Alchemy was very upset when she heard this. She said that she didn't like the spirit and that it always made her feel bad. It didn't inspire her trust. Suddenly a familiar voice was heard among the crowd. Everyone turned around and saw the hero Summer Spirit, who asked them who started the fire without his permission. He smiled and pretended that he knew nothing about the fire. When Kim saw him, he could barely contain himself from jumping on him in an attempt to finish him off. He knew full well that he was the one who started the fire, but he knew that the Summer Spirit was an incredibly strong opponent for him. The Holy Knight greeted him and told him that a fire had broken out in the old slums and asked if he could help them. Then the Summer Spirit smiled and asked what he would get in return for saving him. He didn't want to do it for nothing. Kim clenched his weapon in his hand. He was incredibly angry at him. He thought he was a sick bastard who was looking for profit in a fire he had set himself. People were taking pictures of him on their phones and saying that he was a legend and human qualities weren't important to them. He turned around and started to walk away, telling them to look for other volunteers to help them for free. He didn't care about the fire and those who might have gotten hurt because of it. Kim thought that no one knew what he was really like. Everyone thought he was a hero who just had a bad temper, and he was the only one who knew the true face of this maniac. He decided that he had to kill him at any cost. He realized that it was unrealistic to do so now, but a plan had matured in his mind to kill him and save a lot of innocent people. Kim walked out of the crowd and headed towards the fire. Along the way, people tried to stop him, saying that it was too dangerous and he could just die there. He thought that he had to stop him for the sake of humanity. For the honor of the hunters, he realized that the hunter was only a human who was rushing to fight the monsters. Summer Spirit noticed that the guy was approaching him. He thought he should wake up and not do something stupid, but Kim had already made up his mind and pushed the hero away and walked straight into the flames. All the people standing there were incredibly shocked by this. Kim screamed in pain. He was burning alive, but it was all for one purpose. Only so he could kill the Summer Spirit. He died and went back for hours. After his death, he was back in his bed. He heard the hero interview again. He decided that the automatism of the skill had been perfectly practiced. The system notified him that his rank was currently F, and so he had no penalties from the skill. Kim realized that with his powers he wouldn't be able to finish off the summer spirit, and even if he did succeed, the hero would just go back in time. He realized that he had the exact same skill. He looked at his weapon, thinking that in that case there was only one thing left for him, a low-ranked hunter, and Tutan remembered the hero's interview, where he was asked at what age he awakened his first skill. The hero said it was in the summer when he was 21 years old, and it had been 11 years since then, the host remarking that judging from the fact that he remembered it in detail, he had an excellent memory. But he objected, saying that wasn't quite right. He added that he remembered it because it was his birthday that day, so the event was set aside in his memory. The summer spirit told him the exact date he had awakened his first skill. It was June 11 years ago. Kim figured if you counted back from that day, it was exactly days. Kim pointed his weapon at himself, and thought that if he died once, he would be able to return to the moment of his awakening, and then he could finish him off before he even got his first skill. He gave himself the first blow, and then the system notified him that he was dead. He woke up on the bed again, picked up his weapon, and thought that he had one more time to die. Kim died time after time. The number of days was getting smaller and smaller, but he felt incredible pain with each kill he made, and finally the last time was left. He struck, and he managed to hit the intended day. He woke up with the weapon in his hands. The first thing he did was look at the clock. He realized he had made it, and went back to the point where the summer spirit legend had not yet begun. He walked over to the wall and exhaled deeply. Kim sat down on the floor and began to analyze his actions. He realized that by the times he had originally planned, he had died about one more time. This was to cover the time spent on the kills themselves and resting during the breaks. He realized that he had endured all this torment, only so that the world would never hear the legend of the insane and ruthless killer called Summer Spirit. Kim got up after some rest and decided it was time to find his game and finish him off. He was ready to do it. He was just an ordinary guy with no powers, and it was much easier to kill him. He tracked down the place where the hero lived and quietly crept up to his window to see what he was doing. The Summer Spirit was barely able to wake up. It was obvious he had had a little too much to drink last night and had a headache. Kim, for the sake of perfect reconnaissance, lived the day once again. Kim already knew that Summer Spirit. Every time he woke up at exactly the same time in the morning, it was the style of F-rank hunters. He hurriedly got dressed. It was time to go to work. He, just like Kim, thought his life was worthless then. He knew that he was catching a slime on the second floor of the tower at exactly 3 in the afternoon. The Summer Spirit was disgruntled and angry about his job. He had been catching slimes for 100 days now, which was repulsive to him. Kim caught him shouting that he was a knight of light and dreamed of living large, just like the Holy Sword. And then Kim realized that in a year, he was an extremely mediocre hunter, waiting only for a sharp turn in his life. The Summer Spirit nervously said that it was impossible to find a winning lottery ticket or an S-level skill for once. He wished he could just get lucky one day. He was looking forward to it. Kim thought that if things went the way they were going, it wouldn't be long before things would be the way he wished it to be. But Kim was determined that the Summer Spirit wouldn't see his future. There wasn't much prospect in catching slimes alone, and then with determination, the Summer Spirit decided to move to a high-level area that wasn't frequented by newbie hunters. The Summer Spirit moved to the hunting grounds on the floor where no one else would be here but him in the next few minutes. It was the perfect moment to deal with him. Kim decided to smear himself with slime and pretend he was hurt. He came out of the bushes and asked the Summer Spirit for help. He told him that he was attacked by wolves and asked him for some kind of potion. The Summer Spirit turned around and angrily asked him what he wanted from him. Why did he come to this floor? The Summer Spirit got angry because he thought Kim had already raised all the monsters. He thought it was impossible to hunt here today. Kim continued to ask him for the potion, to which the Summer Spirit replied that because of him, he would not be able to earn a day's wage. The Summer Spirit looked at him and asked him how much money he was willing to give him. Kim kept silent, and then he poked him with a stick and asked him again how much he was willing to pay him for the potion. He said that his hunt had failed. He asked him in surprise that he had to give this expensive potion for nothing to a man he was seeing for the first time. He said that nothing was given for free in life. The summer spirit showed him the potion and said that in the alchemy market, this potion was sold for gold. Kim replied that he would give him the gold and asked him to give him the potion sooner. Then the summer spirit pushed him away with his weapon and added that he was about to die but was only offering him gold pieces. He couldn't believe he had valued his life at such a small amount. He grabbed him by his blouse and told him to give him everything he had. He started pulling his wallet out of his blouse as he thought he had a problem with his hands and decided to take all his money himself. Kim knew he was always like this. The summer spirit threw him to the ground and was going to see how much money he had managed to get. He opened his wallet and started counting and found out he only had gold pieces. He was not happy with the small amount. He watched as he robbed him, and then Kim decided to push pity and said it was only his money. He wondered how the summer spirit would act. The summer spirit put his hand on his head and told him not to worry. He would find a good use for them. Then Kim demanded his potion, for which he gave him all his money. But the hero wasn't going to give him the potion. He said that if he would have saved him, he could then start to take revenge on him. He said that any man would want to live in peace and quiet, and he gave him a good look, so he decided that he had no other choice. The summer spirit thought, why wouldn't he in that case just die here and now, so he could continue to live his life to his liking. He pulled out his spear and prepared to finish him off. He swung his spear but not in time to make an attack. Kim crouched down and counterattacked him. Now he was ready to give him some peace and quiet. He pulled his weapon from his blouse and launched an attack at him that he couldn't dodge. Kim dealt him a fatal blow and watched him die. He was pleased that he had been able to get rid of him. He figured he now had a 1 in 10,000 chance that the threat of life would be able to rouse him. He was determined that it was up to him to send the hero to the other world. He kept his promise and finished him off. He finished him off so he would definitely not be able to be reborn again. By doing so, Kim saved many innocent lives in the future. Kim stood over his body and thought that before he killed him that time in the dark alley, he had done something strange. That time, he had actually said his name before he killed him. He was angry with him. He said that during those days he realized that he was a real scumbag who pretended to be a knight of honor who had entered a holy duel. But in reality, he was a simple murderer. Kim didn't understand how he dared to kill innocent people. And at the same time, he was the most honorable knight. It hurt him a lot because he considered him his idol and wanted to be just like him. He sadly lowered his head and stood over the body of the hero. He felt bad that he was so bad. He felt sorry for all the people he had killed, but suddenly he turned around and saw a pack of wolves. He said that he didn't care about the body of the hero and they could have eaten him. Kim turned around and walked away, and the wolves started their business. He went deep into the forest where they had prepared things for him to change into after killing the summer spirit. He changed into clean clothes and decided it was time for him to leave the floor. He wasn't going to linger here any longer and headed to the first floor of the tower. He couldn't believe this was the end of it. Kim moved to the first floor and the first person he saw was the vigilante. He felt a little uneasy walking past him as he had confessed to murder. But he calmly walked past him, and then he realized that this was really the end. He sat at the bar and drank beer. He was glad that no one knew what had happened. He asked for more refills. He wanted another glass of draft beer. The waiter brought him a glass of beer and said he noticed that he had been drinking a lot. He assumed that today's hunt had gone very well for him. Kim smilingly replied that it had gone very well. He was drinking a beer and heard the news that the people from each rank had banded together to challenge the floor, and now some people felt that the ranks were completely unnecessary. So Kim decided to open the hunter's skill window. Kim looked at his skills. He was pleased with them. He thought looking at them he didn't need any snacks for his beer. One look at the skills could satiate him quite well, but he found one significant problem, that among other skills he didn't have a single combat skill. Then he thought that was where the human insatiability lay. Kim closed the skills window and turned to himself. He said that if he started wanting more he could become a thief. He already realized that he could achieve a lot with these skills. He thought that he could win the lottery held by the Merchant Association Guild. He could sell for money plans for future high floors that no one had explored yet. He had a lot of prospects ahead of him. As Kim sat and contemplated what he would do in the future, a man he had never seen before entered the bar, and he immediately ordered himself some milk. The man with a stern look asked for vodka and some sugar to be added to the warm milk, and if they had honey, it would be better to have it put in instead of sugar. Kim thought he was quite imposing for his age. He was drinking a beer and heard all the conversation. The man mistook the waiter for the bartender, but the man reported that he had been paid enough for the extra hassle. Everyone around them started discussing the man who had entered the bar. They recognized him and started whispering behind his back. They couldn't believe it was really him, but they didn't understand why he was here. If only to boost the morale of the hunters at a time like this, when society was increasingly agreeing that everyone needed to unite. No one knew where the Holy Sword was missing or what it was doing now. Kim remembered that the Holy Sword's real name was Marcus Cullenberry. In the future, he disappeared for a very long time, so years later everyone forgot about him. But he was the only number of the tower until the Summer Spirit became famous. He realized that he was the best of the best in this period. Kim wondered if this old man had an S-level skill, but he had normal useful attack skills unlike him. But then he remembered his skill that could copy the skill of the enemy who killed him. He realized that this skill could copy the skill of any hunter that would kill him. Even the incumbent now had numbers, and he considered it his huge advantage that now he was impossible to kill. Kim didn't know what he should do, risk it or not. He wanted to get the combat skill he needed to pass the tower. He looked at his phone to find out the information that was being written about the Holy Sword. He read all the comments that were left about it, but there was no specific information, and then Kim realized that it was a real mystery to everyone. He realized that for him there was no worthwhile information about it. Kim thought it would be easier if this nobleman was half as much of an attention seeker as the Summer Spirit. Then there would be plenty of information about him. He heard the Holy Sword sitting and talking to himself. He was asking someone not to speak too loudly. Kim didn't understand at all who he was talking to. It scared him a little. Kim thought that at the very least what he was talking to himself turned out to be true. He grinned, thinking that did all the first rankers have to be weird. But then he came across a strange message that described the topics that should never be touched upon in a conversation with the Holy Sword. He was curious about what he could not talk to him about. The chat described a true story. One day a group of hunters crossed paths with him in the hunting grounds. They told him that this was where they hunted and asked him to follow the rules. They informed him that the place was occupied. A few days ago in the hunting grounds of the floor, some high rankers scandalized Holy Sword and asked him to leave to hunt somewhere else. But Holy Sword informed them that this was the first time he had heard of the rule the hunters were talking about. The hunter laughed with him and said that apparently it was time to change his hearing aid, or the rule just hadn't gotten through to him due to the fact that he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He said that, judging by the way the Holy Sword treated his family, his grandchildren had been on the streets for a long time. The hunter had no time to finish the sentence before the Holy Sword killed him. He wouldn't stand for the insult to his family. The people in the chat room thought it was a complete lie and the Holy Sword couldn't have killed the man. The author replied that it was up to them to believe it or not. He just thought they should have known. That's why he wrote it. Kim was engrossed in reading the correspondence in the chat room, where it was written that in any case, if you didn't want to die by his sword, then don't tell him about his grandchildren for any reason. He decided he should have checked this information. He memorized what he couldn't talk to him about. Then he heard the Holy Sword say that he would figure it out himself and asked him to leave him alone. The Holy Sword didn't finish his drink, threw the money on the table, said everything was delicious, got up and headed for the exit. The waiter said goodbye to him and went to clean up his table. After he left, the people in the bar were able to talk quietly. They were waiting for him to leave the establishment. They thought he had a marasmus if he talked to himself. They were afraid to say it in front of him, or he would kill them all. Kim decided he should have gone after him. He paid for his beer, thanked him for the tasty drink, and headed out to follow the Holy Sword. He walked outside and decided that now he needed a number in the rank, but he had yet to find one. He wanted to check the information he had read. Kim looked around and couldn't find him. He didn't realize where he had gone. He almost immediately went out to get him. He knew the Holy Sword couldn't have gotten too far. Amongst the crowd he saw him and decided to follow him. Kim thought he was the only one in Babylon who was dressed smartly, and it was very conspicuous amongst the others in the city. Kim walked and wondered how he could have had the skill. He remembered that the Summer Spirit had the rebirth skill. He couldn't even imagine what a successful sword saint from a past generation had. He thought that it was surely a more martial skill than rebirth. He was excited that this skill could be his. He wanted to be lucky this time. Kim walked over to the tree and thought that the holy sword had to be somewhere nearby. And then he heard the holy sword tell him to come out of hiding. Kim was amazed that he had managed to find it. He figured they wouldn't have any witnesses in this place. He came out from behind a tree and apologized to him. He said he had one small request for him. The holy sword smiled and asked if he hadn't intentionally followed him so carefully. He assumed that Kim had wanted him to notice him. He wondered what request he could have had for a simple old man to appear so creepy. Kim was shocked and thought that the holy sword had misunderstood him, and for some reason thought he had deliberately shown his presence. Kim tried his best to hide his presence, but he was caught. He was worried that he didn't have any good weapons. Kim noticed that the holy sword was holding his sword as if he was going to attack him. Kim thought that he just wanted to follow him, and everything seemed to be going well. But why did the holy sword tell him that he had incredible acting? He mistook him for an assassin on the front lines. He didn't understand why he thought that. After all, he was an F-rank hunter. Then Kim thought that he wouldn't even have to mention his grandchildren for him to kill him. Kim replied to him that he didn't understand what holy sword was talking about. The holy sword thought his words were an abomination. He couldn't believe that Kim kept playing even when he exposed him. He told him that he wouldn't have been able to fool his eyes. Kim tried to explain everything to him and asked him to listen. He didn't want the holy sword to finish him off right away. He wanted to talk to him. He said he was genuinely curious and wanted to learn something from him. He asked him what place he was like as a special class assassin. He told him that he was just a regular guy and didn't hurt anyone. The holy sword shouted at him to shut up and told him that he had various skills, among which was the skill that allowed him to see how many kills his opponent had committed. Kim understood whatever his motivation, but murder was murder. He knew what kind of monster the one he killed could grow into, but for the people of this time his excuse was baseless. He thought the holy sword had seen over him one murder. He told him that it might have sounded like an excuse to him, but he asked him to listen. He told him that he had a good reason for killing one person. The holy sword taking off his hat told him that he could have sworn before the heavens, but it was repulsive that such a demon who had taken the lives of so many people dared to still touch the sacred. He told him that he himself had not lived a sinless life, but he would never have carried out such a massacre, nor could he have killed so many people as he had. Kim couldn't understand what kind of massacre the holy sword was talking about. He had only killed one person in his entire life. Then the holy sword pointed his weapon at him and angrily told him that he had continued to lie to him without any shame or regret. The holy sword informed him that the number of unfortunate people killed by him, he could clearly see above his head. It was a shocking figure. He was amazed that he was able to kill a man. Kim heard this number and tried to understand where it came from. After all, he had only killed Yusuha once. But then he realized that the number of times he had killed himself to get into the past was once. The holy sword thought that the black dragon had sent him. He tried to run away from the old man, for in his eyes he was a rare maniac who had brutally killed a man. Kim realized that the problem now was not copying the old man's skill. The holy sword rushed to attack. Kim, running away, thought that if the holy sword had a similar skill, he would try to kill him every time he saw him. Kim heard the holy sword promise to do anything to finish him off. The old man made his first sword attack, but Kim successfully dodged it. The old man wasn't the least bit surprised. He said that he expected such agility from a special class assassin. Kim thought the old man was deaf and didn't want to hear him. While dodging the attack, Kim tripped over a rock and fell hard to the ground. Now he wouldn't be able to escape from the old man. He tried to get up and realized that even if he was lucky enough to dodge once, there was no way he would be able to dodge the old man's attack a second time, who was already drawing his sword to kill the assassin lying on the ground. But suddenly Kim heard the old man again asking for the voices in his head to be silenced. He heard him say that he couldn't just capture and interrogate him, thus leaving such a demon alive. Kim didn't realize who he was talking to. The holy sword continued to argue with himself. Kim, listening to him, thought his dialogue was too stacked to be a simple mental illness. He assumed he was using some other skill. Kim assumed that the holy sword could use telepathy. He had heard of it somehow, and that there was a skill of that type. He thought that the holy sword could have been sharing information about him with the other guilds at this time, and let them know that there was such an assassin who had ruined the man, and then there would be a real hunt for him. Kim knew that in that case, the hunter management would have put out a wanted notice, and he would have been targeted by the high-level ones, including the huge guilds. and then it would have ended with him being executed in the first floor plaza of the tower. He decided that it was impossible to let information about him be leaked, and then he made the decision that he needed to die urgently and go back for hours. Then he decided to interrupt the old man and turn to him. The old man looked at him and said that he had already made up his mind and that he couldn't influence him with words. Then Kim asked him to say hello to his grandchildren. He was deliberately trying to provoke him to kill him. Kim continued by saying that he was from a noble family in Northern Europe, and that the higher the position of the family, the more it could attract bandits. He said that there had been a lot of chaotic news lately, and since they were the blood and flesh of the Holy Sword, his grandchildren were definitely marvelous. Kim didn't have time to speak, and the Holy Sword unleashed its attack on him. Kim couldn't even notice the blow on him. He didn't understand how one could achieve such swordsmanship. His body fell to the ground, and the last thing he saw was the Holy Sword walking away. Kim realized then that he wished he could be just like him. He envied the old man. Kim wished he could have such a strike too. Kim died and found himself in front of the skill cards that were created after his death. He was happy and thought that now the skill numbers from the 2 eras would be his. He looked at all the skill cards and didn't see a single golden one among them, and he couldn't figure out where it was. He wished that he, in this time, had the same luck as with the summer spirit. Kim confirmed the creation of the card and was incredibly frustrated as the gold card never showed up. He thought it was some kind of joke that among all the skills, there wasn't one he needed. He realized that Marcus Cullenberry, who was legendarily the best summer spirit hunter, had managed to reach the top only by his own efforts without a single S-class skill. Kim was starting to get nervous and thought that there was no way that could have happened, and that there had to be a combat skill among the silver cards that he just needed. He noticed that there were 3 bad cards and 4 silver-colored cards, and he decided to choose the silver-colored skill card, so he discarded 3 bad cards at once. Kim calculated that the probability was 1 in 4 among the silver cards. There was an unusual skill that showed the number of kills, and he didn't want it. He wanted a combat skill. He grabbed the card and hoped there was a Holy Sword combat skill. The system notified him that he had completed his selection and that the skill had been copied. The system took him back 24 hours. Waking up, Kim decided to immediately open the hunter skill window. He saw a new skill sword constellation level. It was not a kill count skill. Kim was upset that his new skill was passive again. He wanted to get some active skill, something like a rare martial art or awakening. But he was happy that his skill was a plus level anyway. He thought that he had completely stopped appreciating things he never dreamed of before. Then he decided to open the skill card, but he couldn't tell from the name what the skill was. Kim turned his head and saw someone lying on the bed with him, telling him to be quiet and not to disturb his sleep. Kim was shocked and didn't understand who it was and why he was calling him an old man. The unknown man kept saying that he was always with him anyway, no matter where he went, and there was no need to wake him up in the middle of the night. Kim then decided to ask him who he was. Kim apologized and asked who he was. He looked at him with surprised eyes. The unknown man turned around and couldn't understand who was in front of him either. He asked if he could see him, to which Kim gave him a positive nod. The unknown man was surprised. He decided to ask if he could hear him, to which Kim said that from their conversation, it was not clear to him that he had seen and heard him. He wanted to know who he was and how he came to be in his apartment. He started to get nervous and asked where they were and why it was crowded like a dog box. He asked him where Grandpa Marcus was. Then Kim stopped him and tried to find out if he was talking about Marcus Cullenberry Holy Sword. The unknown man began to dart around the room looking for the old man. He answered him that he had talked about him, though he thought that calling a dilettante like him a holy sword was overkill. He added that if he was talking about the old gentleman, then yes, he was talking about him. He wanted to know where the old man had gone. He asked if he could be around. Kim read that it was a spirit coming from another world where he had cleared the tower down to the floor, but was defeated on he became a rear spirit who did not fulfill his wish, but he could infiltrate the mind of his master. He decided to ask the ghost if he was the rear spirit of the Holy Sword. The ghost turned around and surprisingly replied that he was the spirit of an old man he couldn't find. Kim, hearing the answer, was shocked. He looked at the ghost, apologized, and said that he had accidentally copied him at the Holy Sword. Then the ghost shouted in horror that he should return him to the old man. The ghost said that if he had copied it with his skill, then he should have been able to undo the effect of the skill. But after realizing that he couldn't do that, the ghost was disappointed and didn't understand how it couldn't be undone. Kim didn't know what to do at all. He replied that he didn't dispose of the skill at his will. Everything was happening without his input, and he had no control over it. The ghost turned over and started crying. He was addressing old man Marcus. He thought he was a misbehaving student. He said his teacher was kidnapped by an inept like him. Kim then asked him not to cry upside down. He was really worried about him. He said that it was a disaster and it was all the old man's fault for neglecting his dear teacher, who had told him many times that a teacher should have been appreciated. Kim asked him to calm down and suggested him to live a quiet, peaceful life. The ghost said that living would not work for him. He was already dead. Then Kim asked him to die peacefully, to which the ghost started shouting that Kim cursed the poor ghost and asked him to die repeatedly. Kim thought that the ghost was talking a lot, and then he analyzed the Holy Sword's behavior when he was talking to himself, and then he realized what was the reason for his talking. He sadly realized that he was in a position where he had to hide from the Holy Sword all his life, and he had this one out of all the skills. The ghost didn't understand why he was hiding from the old man. He knew that there was no kinder hunter than the old man. The ghost added that the old man used to lose his temper when it came to his grandchildren. Kim replied with his hands on his face that he had already realized that he said that among the skills of the Holy Sword, there was a skill that showed the number of kills of the opponent. He realized that Kim was telling him about the investigator's eyesight skill, but he thought it was a useless skill that only reported whether the opponent had killed or not. Kim raised his finger above his head and called out a number. Kim explained to the ghost that the number of kills hanging above his head was exactly what the old man had seen before he killed him. The ghost couldn't believe that Kim was able to kill that many people. It was too much for a beginner. The ghost approached him and told him that he was a rookie of rookies, and he noticed that from the looks of it, he couldn't even feel the aura. He couldn't understand how a frame like that was able to kill a person. Kim did his best to explain everything to the ghost. He said that he didn't kill that many people, that in fact he only killed one person who would become a villain in the future. He said that he was reborn to kill a person from the future years from now. He had an ability that copied one of the skills of the enemy who killed him. The moment the villain killed him, Kim copied his rebirth skill. Kim added that even if he died, he only went back 24 hours. He told the ghost that his body became immortal, and with every kill he made, he gained a new skill. He explained to the ghost that he wanted to take revenge on him, but he was a number in the rank of their world. Besides, as long as he had the rebirth skill, he wouldn't be able to kill him, so he traveled to a time when he hadn't gotten the skill yet. The ghost listened to him carefully and wanted to clarify that he had traveled back in time to take revenge on one person. In doing so, he had committed suicide so many times to go back years. He got as close to him as possible and asked him what his name was, to which he replied that his name was Kim Kunja, and the ghost asked why he chose an old man for him to kill him. The ghost wanted to know why when he took revenge on that guy. The first thing he did was to copy the old man's skill, Kim replied, because he was the hunter number of this generation. He decided to immediately gather the skills of strong people, and then he himself would become stronger. He furrowed his eyebrows and was quite surprised that Kim had answered his question so honestly to him, because the skill card said that apart from him, no one else could notice the ghost. The ghost realized that precisely because no one else had seen him, no one else would know about it. Kim was perfectly safe, and so he didn't hide anything from the ghost. Then he asked him to stand up. The ghost said that Kim was extremely stubborn. He appreciated his physique, which was not bad. He also saw in him a desire for self-improvement. After thinking for a while, the ghost asked him to show him how he hunted monsters. He was curious to see him in action. He wanted to check something else out. They went hunting late at night. Kim turned to the ghost and asked if a couple of monsters would be enough, or if he needed to catch more. But the ghost said a couple would be enough. Kim then pulled out his weapon and started hunting the slime. The ghost, looking at this, realized that this was exactly what he expected to see, and what he had assumed right from the start. The ghost remembered that in his past life he was called the Sword King. He was from a completely different world, which like this world had a tower. He could traverse floors faster than any of his fellow countrymen. Kim thought that there was a legend that a summer spirit had broken through to the 40th floor, and the skill card said that the ghost was able to reach the floor. This was something incredible. The ghost looking at him said that this kind of thing was immediately apparent to experienced people like him. He was talking about the potential of a hunter. That was why he said he wanted to see how he hunted. Kim lowered his eyes sadly and said that meant it was all for nothing. He thought he had no potential and that they had only wasted their time. The ghost looked at him and couldn't understand what nonsense he was talking about. He told him that he had potential in him and he believed that he had hidden incredible potential in him. Kim was shocked to hear this. He thought the ghost was just joking. The ghost said he had no talent for martial arts. His movements were inept. His physique was unfit. He could only dream of awakening his aura. But he had another talent that was unique to him. The ghost noticed that he had a complete lack of fear of death. This was only available to him. The ghost said that usually people in battle would dodge attacks at least a little. But he surprisingly went all the way to the end without fearing that he might be killed. He added that when he killed himself more times, he managed to erase his sense of fear for good. Kim was shocked and didn't think that such a thing was also a talent. The ghost explained to him that not all talents had to be innate. Anyone could find their talent in the process of life, and the hardest thing for a person to achieve was to conquer the fear of death. He said that he had conquered the fear of death. Kim stood there unable to say a word. He thought that in his whole life no one had ever said that to him. Even he thought he was a hopeless loser. Kim remembered that he was just hurt that the summer spirit had treated him like an insect. He was very hurt, so he didn't think about the past or the future at all. He died more times than not. He couldn't realize that dying now was his talent. And then the ghost only wanted to know one thing from him when he was killed by the holy sword. What was he thinking at that moment? Kim thought for a moment and said that at that moment he was thinking about how beautiful it was. The holy sword was able to kill him quickly and painlessly. The ghost laughed out loud, and he said that was very interesting. Kim looked at him and didn't understand what it was that made him laugh so hard. He calmed down and said that he was saying that his ability was copying and not stealing a skill. Then it turns out that the holy sword had another ghost as a rear spirit. The rear spirit said that he was now curious who would be more successful at hunting him or the holy sword. Then the spirit decided to help him and become better than the old man. He added that he would train him so that he would be as good as the old man and could even become much stronger than him. And then they decided to take over the tower once. The next morning, the spirit of the rear tried his best to wake him up, but Kim didn't want to wake up and asked to be left alone for just a few more minutes. Kim turned away and covered his head with a pillow, hoping not to hear the spirit. The ghost said that maybe right now the old man was conquering the floor and he was still asleep. Then the spirit decided to play him a song that he sang in his homeland. The spirit said that as soon as he started to sing the first verse, all the soldiers' heads exploded one by one. Kim was nervous because he wanted to sleep so badly. The rear spirit stood over him and was about to start singing. Then Kim stood up and nervously asked if he knew what time it was that he decided to wake him up. Then the spirit asked what time it was, to which Kim angrily shouted that it was morning and it was still very early. The ghost reacted calmly to his anger and added that even bugs woke up in the morning and went about their business. Then he said that Kim was weaker than a bug, so he needed to get up even earlier and practice. Kim said he realized why the holy sword woke up every morning to practice. It wasn't because he was conscientious, but because the spirit was always making noise and keeping him awake. Then the spirit yelled that it woke him up because he was bored. The spirit explained that getting up early was good for him, and that he would thank him later on, that he was able to exercise longer because of him. Kim, looking at him, said he just wished he could kill him. The ghost smiled and said that he was already dead, so he wouldn't be able to kill him again, and that it would be easier for him to die himself. But he remembered that he wouldn't be able to kill himself, so he decided to call him Kim the Zombie. Kim thought that he wouldn't be able to get rid of the spirit. So he decided to calm down, get dressed, and go for a morning jog. He took his time running through the empty streets under the supervision of the rear spirit. The ghost reminded him that besides stubbornness, he had no other strengths. Then he said that he personally preferred to learn everything from the bottom, but he didn't even see the bottom in him. Days had passed imperceptibly since Kim had copied the sword constellation skill from the holy sword, and in that time, he had hunted Yusuhua once more, and was diligently trying to avoid clashing with the holy sword. Kim continued to run in the morning, and as he ran, the spirit of the rear tried to talk to him. He told him that his talent he would call abyss, and thought it was a cool skill, but Kim asked him not to disturb him. He was focused on running. Now Kim was training according to a schedule that the spirit of the rear had personally made. He said that he needed special extra classes, and those classes had to be paid for, and then he asked him to win the lottery. There was a guild called the Merchant Alliance. The official name was the Merchant Alliance. The head of the guild was a ranked hunter nicknamed the Countess. She possessed a skill that made her the only one who could exchange items from the tower with the outside world. Thanks to this skill, the Merchant Alliance monopolized the economy within the tower. Kim and the rear spirit went to the guild, where they were met by a guild representative who greeted them and asked what he could help them with and what brought them to the guild. He knew that the only place in Babylon where lotteries were held was the Merchants Association. Kim held out a ticket to him and told him that he had come to collect his lottery winnings. The representative smiled and congratulated him on his lottery winnings. The spirit asked him why the representative wore a hat with cat ears, to which Kim replied that it was said that the head of the guild was a servant of cats. He apologized and asked if he had checked the number on the ticket. The representative said that if it had been more than 2 years since he bought the ticket, it was impossible to get the winnings. Kim thought that he had bought that ticket right after the rear spirit appeared. He said that everything was fine and the ticket had been bought last week. Kim remembered that the spirit had insisted relentlessly that they needed capital. The representative smiled and said that all that was left to do was to move on to personal data verification, after which he would be able to claim his winnings, but he would have to wait a little longer. When he checked the ticket and his personal data, the representative was simply shocked. In front of him stood a man who was able to win the grand prize of the lottery. Everyone around turned their attention to him. They were shocked that the guy in front of them had won first place in the lottery. The spirit was also amazed that the money could be so easy to get hold of. The representative informed him that he had checked the room and asked him to wait a minute. He needed to call the person in charge, to which Kim replied that he could take his time. Kim remembered that in the future the summer spirit had also won the lottery because of his skill. He had learned something from his example that if you had to hide something, you certainly didn't win. He figured he didn't have to be afraid of them telling everyone about him anyway. If he was killed, the guild's reputation would suffer the most. And after a minute, the person in charge, Arthur Taylor, came out to them. Arthur said that he was also known as the Keeper of the Gold, and he would appreciate it if he had no trouble calling him by that name. Kim introduced himself in response and said that his middle name suited the guild well. Kim figured if he had a middle name, he was a hunter entering the top. Arthur smiled and said he was often told similar words. He motioned for him to follow him. They needed to go up to the top floor. He knew that with his rank, the entrance to the top floor was closed, but today was a special occasion. He was a client for thousands of gold. The spirit noticed that he had never been addressed respectfully before. It was obvious that he was pleased. The spirit remembered that Kim had also gotten sympathetic when he told him that he had a talent for dying. Kim looked at him and asked him to be quiet, to which the spirit replied that he shouldn't have been so simple-minded and to take an example from him. He gave him advice to think that he only existed so that the people of the world would honor him. Kim thought to the summer spirit that the Lord of the Sword, all the great ones, were psychopaths. He decided to never take an example from them. Arthur turned around and noticed something was wrong with him. He asked him if he was all right. Could they continue to the top floor? To which Kim replied that he was just brooding, and he was fine. He said he was scared for him because he saw him turn pale. Arthur thought he might have accidentally hurt him in some way. He smiled and waited for Kim to come over to him. Kim couldn't believe that they were so worried about him. The spirit was surprised that he was so easy to pierce. Kim and Arthur walked up to a special door. Arthur said it was the VIP audience room. Arthur informed him that behind the doors was his cash prize for this week's seat. He opened the doors in front of him, and Kim saw his winnings, thousands of gold. If you converted to a city's currency, there were billions of one. Kim thought that with that kind of money, he could live his whole life without worrying about anything. If that was his goal, it would be a dream come true right now. Arthur asked him if he wanted to take the whole amount or keep it in the safe. However, Kim decided to conquer the tower and reach the top as a hunter. He thought that money was just a means to that end. He didn't want to get caught up in just making money. He wanted to achieve more. Kim thought he had already experienced a more enchanting golden luster than that of gold coins. He looked at Arthur and informed him of his decision. He said he was leaving his money in their safe deposit box. Arthur smiled and replied that it was indeed a wise choice. Personally, he always recommended this option to all winners without exception. He told him that he understood perfectly well that he would have liked to take all the winnings at once. But there were so many horrible people in their world who would kill for that kind of money. Kim turned to him and said that he would like to buy a seat as an honorary member of their guild. Arthur said that buying a second-level honorary position cost thousands of gold, to which Kim replied that he was willing to pay for the purchase outright. Arthur asked if he was in any other guild. Kim smiled and replied that he was not a member of any other guild. Then the spirit of the rear told him that he was thinking better than he thought and that he was doing the right thing. The spirit explained that the guild wasn't just a friendly gathering of hunters. The main reason hunters joined guilds was for patronage on behalf of the guild. He noted that Kim was pretty good at this. Kim knew that they had a management of hunters and vigilantes, but otherwise there was lawlessness in the city. It was easy to see by how easily the Summer Spirit and Holy Sword were able to kill him. The Summer Spirit had never been a member of any guild and enjoyed his own personal superiority. He had once won the lottery but never paid taxes for protection. The fact that he refused all the guilds restricted them greatly, so they tried to kill him. Kim wasn't going to repeat his mistakes and feud with the big guilds in vain. He made a request to Arthur saying that he was now living in a cramped apartment, so he would like him to recommend him where it would be best to stay. He also asked him if the newspapers came and started asking about the winner. He wanted his name withheld, but to be sure to tell them that he was an honorary member of the Merchants Association. Arthur answered him that he would have carried out everything flawlessly. The spirit of the rear laughed from the expression on Arthur's face. He said it looked as if he was in pain from the obvious and simple things he was telling him. Kim smiled and exhaled calmly. He said it was so turbulent in their time, and he should have prepared at least this way. Kim replied to the spirit as well, saying that he kept calling him a simpleton. The ghost said he didn't remember him calling him that. He put a hand on his shoulder and told him that he was doing pretty good on his own and that he could take it easy on him. The rear spirit told him that he could see that he was in a good mood, to which Kim replied that it was because he realized that now everything was just beginning. Kim thought that he had died once to go back for days, the special privileges of rebirth that he had not been able to enjoy before, only because he had taken revenge on the Summer Spirit. Now was the time to take advantage of them. They were walking down the street, and the rear spirit asked if he had told him that what was important about the extra lessons was the payment for them. Without money, the training process was jeopardized. He said that Kim was now able to secure the tuition. He asked him what that could mean, what they needed to do next. Kim hesitantly replied that they needed to find a proper teacher for the extra classes. The spirit said he already had a teacher. What he needed was reinforcement, a miracle potion that would enhance his physical abilities. Or something like scrolls that spelled out the basics of martial arts. But now at his level, even reading a scroll wouldn't help them. The spirit said that Kim just couldn't understand anything in them. So there was no choice but the miracle potions, which had to be pretty good. He said that there was a guild of doctors and pharmacists. The spirit knew that there would be some kind of miracle potion for them from the best craftsmen. He added that he had one place in mind. Kim asked if it would cost them a lot. The spirit replied that, of course it would cost a lot of money. He asked if Kim wanted to know how much the potion would cost. He leaned over and told him the amount in his ear. Kim heard the amount and started running after him. He said that even if he gave all his money, he would only have enough for a bottle of the potion. The ghost replied that if he got a discount, he would be able to get a bottle. The ghost said it was all because he was not capable enough. He asked him to be quiet and follow him. But suddenly the ghost stopped and gravely told him to hide rather. He completely forgot to tell him that the Holy Sword was a regular customer of this store, and they were not allowed to cross paths. He had little time left to hide and not get caught by him. Kim was angry with him. He didn't understand how he could have forgotten about this. He had asked him to warn him about it in advance. He barely had time to run behind a trash can. As he passed by, the Holy Sword looked at him and went on his way. He sat there thinking that if he had gotten caught, he would have added a lot of unnecessary trouble. He struggled to hold his breath so the old man wouldn't notice him. The rear spirit said he had bad news, and that the old man was here today. The rear spirit explained to him that this meant that the old man had also come to buy the miracle potion. He abruptly started running and told him that they had to hurry. They reached the end of the street, and saw the old man already entering the store. They were only a few minutes late. The spirit knew it was the best potion store. Kim said that going to the same store as the Holy Sword was risky. He pulled out his phone and started looking for something. He looked at the alliance rankings and tried to find the right one, but it wasn't in the top. He hoped to find it, at least in the top. He couldn't find it, and the spirit thought that he couldn't find his luck. But Kim replied that it could be the other way around. It could be that the potion could cost him very little. Kim informed the spirit that he could have bought the best potions for mere pennies. He knew an incredibly good pharmacist. They went to a poor area of town. The spirit said they were getting into more and more wilderness. The rear spirit looked around and asked him if this was definitely where the talented pharmacist lived, to which Kim replied that he wasn't just talented, they were headed for a true genius. Then the ghost asked him if he was deceiving him. He couldn't understand why the genius was in such a place. Kim was confident and replied that if he didn't want to, he could not believe him. Kim noticed that a man was following him and wanted to rob him, but he got scared and took him for a madman. When he realized that, he was talking to himself and changed his mind about robbing him. He did not stop and walked confidently forward. The spirit was amazed that the zombie Kim knew where to go, and it was not long before they heard someone asking not to touch the device for experiments. They witnessed one unpleasant scene, and then Kim said that they had come to the exact right place, but the rear spirit still doubted that the alchemical genius was here. Kim saw the girl begging not to take all the devices away from her. Without them, she couldn't even make money for food. But the man needed the money she owed him for 6 months. The man ordered his workers to take everything she had. The girl desperately pleaded to be given a week, just 1 week, to which the man replied that the week had already become a month once and a month a half a year. The girl held onto the cart and in every way possible prevented her possessions from being carted away. She said she had not had time to complete the mixture. She needed her fixings. She couldn't hold onto the cart and fell to the ground carting away her implements. The man gave her advice that she shouldn't do potions anymore. She wasn't good at it. The girl heard passers-by discussing her. They said she had made fun of the merchants in her youth, and now she herself had failed. They thought her potions were very expensive, to which she replied that she charged barely more than cost price. She shouted angrily to them that they could not find potions at such a price anywhere else in Babylon. She said they should have thanked her for trading in such a horrible neighborhood. People started to get sick of her. They thought she was hopeless and that no one else wanted her potions. The girl tried to stop them, but it was too late. She said that since they were gathered here, she asked them to buy 1 bottle of her special power potion from her. But the people didn't want to buy anything from her and dispersed. The rear spirit pointed his finger at her and asked if the genius he was talking about was the hopeless girl that everyone left and took her gadgets. Kim replied that even though he had come to see her, he saw the girl sitting on the ground crying. He leaned over to her and asked if she was still selling potions. He knew she wasn't some crazy person and especially not a loser. In front of him was a future alchemy master. He said that if she was still selling, then he would like to place an order. He needed something expensive. She was a pharmacist who would rise in rank in the future and would be able to become the head of the Alchemy Castle Guild. She rejoiced and replied that she was able to do whatever they needed. The girl got up and wiped her tears and asked if they needed an expensive potion. She wanted to know how expensive. Kim replied that the order would come out to 20,000 gold. The girl was in absolute shock. Kim thought, why don't he make connections with people who would become powerful, untouchable figures in the future, before they even hit rank? He thought it was the same as getting the golden goose laying golden eggs. He looked at her and asked what was wrong with her. He wanted to know if she would accept his order or not. She invited them to her workshop but warned them that her place was a bit untidy. But still, she thought that in the workshop they could talk in detail about the potions he needed. They walked in and saw that it was actually a real mess. Everything was scattered around and nothing was in its place. Seeing this, Kim was stunned. Kim barely made his way over to her. He was tripping over various scattered bottles. The rear spirit said that her sanitation inspired confidence. He asked him if he was sure he wanted to drink this maiden's potions. The maiden put the table in order as best she could, and asked again if he really wanted to order from her and pay her 20,000 gold pieces. She couldn't believe it was true. Kim said that if she didn't believe him, he could pay her the money up front. She started to get worried and said she didn't need to do that, but she changed her mind and asked him to give her the advance. He thought she was in such a dire situation that she was forced to go against principles. He told her that she could use as much money from his safe as needed. He would alert the Merchant Association Guild. The girl was surprised that he told her that she could use as much money as she needed, but Kim asked her to try to keep within 20 because he himself didn't have unlimited money. She pulled out a small notebook and asked him what he wanted to order from her then. She was ready to write it down, but she warned him that if he wanted to order drugs, she would turn them down. It was the one thing she wouldn't take on. Kim was amazed that she was willing to turn down so much money, even though her store had just closed. He thought that even though she was a simpleton, she was an expert who would soon become a master alchemist. He immediately replied that it was in no way drugs. So he asked her not to worry. She was glad to hear that and asked what exactly he needed. Kim looked at the ghost and waited for him to dictate the prescription. He said she didn't seem like a professional at all, but he was ready to tell the prescription. He asked to listen to him carefully. He would only say it once. The rear spirit began to dictate to him the ingredients she needed for the potion. Kim would tell her everything quickly, and the girl would write it down carefully. She counted what the total ingredients were. The ghost said that she had counted and written it down correctly. It was all the ingredients she would need. But the process of making the potion was entirely up to the alchemist. She said that if she mixed it all together, she could make a potion that would maximize her reaction speed. Hearing this, the spirit of the rear was amazed that she had figured out what the potion was so quickly. She said that it required an incredibly high level of skill to make. It had to be cooked, infusing all the ingredients at once without refining them individually. The ghost was surprised and confirmed that she was saying all the right things. Kim told her that she had gotten it right about making this potion. He didn't hide his admiration for her talent. She went on to say that there was usually some poison in the skin of the desert giant worm. There were several ways to neutralize it. One of them required the liver of a rabbit pig. Depending on the method of application, the effect varied greatly. Kim realized that this was a true expert in her field. She said that other similar effects could manifest excessive metabolic acceleration thoroughly. Then Kim interrupted her and asked in how many days she could prepare it. She said emphatically that she needed days, but with enough money she could give it to them in days. She said she could even faster, but she needed to buy new equipment. Kim remembered how he used to try to buy her potion. There were always lines outside her lab, and only those who had a prescription from an alchemy master could get through to her. But there was a line for them too. People waited a year and some for a year and a half. The rear spirit said that he still didn't trust her. He explained that many people spoke well, but were zeros in practice. He said that such people were usually called charlatans. He thought that Kim was just blowing money down the drain. Kim turned around and asked the ghost how he knew this recipe. The spirit told him that it was a recipe of his own making, the best miracle potion he created when he got drunk on all sorts of different toxic substances and mixed them together. He smiled and said that she had complimented him by calling his recipe high level. She had immediately recognized the real value of his recipe and asked him to trust her. Kim added that no matter how much she would be the most important person in the alchemy castle in years to come, to which the spirit replied that they would find out when she gave them the potion. He was sure she would just clean out the money and run away. A day later, the alchemy master came to them and said that she could have made the potion even faster, but she had to go through a lot of combinations. It took longer than she expected. Kim was happy to see her and said it was okay. She had originally warned that it took her days to make the special potion. She said that she had managed to make bottles, and it only turned out to be a box, which she handed to him. Kim then assumed that this volume should have been enough for at least days. Kim thought that this potion would be many times more effective than the store that the rear spirit had advised. He thought that was the way to spend the money. He was pleased with the result. She looked at him and said it was strange to ask this now, but why had he entrusted such an expensive order to a nameless pharmacist? She was confident in her skills, but she wanted to know. One look at his prescription was enough for her to realize that apart from a couple of other people, no one else in Babylon could have handled it. But people held her for a crank. She wondered why he trusted her. Kim pondered how to answer her. After all, he knew perfectly well that the pharmacist in front of him was a rare genius. He didn't know if he could have told her so, but it was more than that. He knew that she had rushed to the scene of the action before anyone else when there was a fire in the city, and she had seen through the summer spirit she is talented, kind, and very perceptive of others. Kim realized that he couldn't pass up such an opportunity to get close to someone like that. He replied that he had helped her because she seemed kind, even though he was sure she would have been a huge success without him. He said it was a shame that only absolute psychopaths made it to the top. He extended his hand to her and said he hoped they had a bright future ahead of them. Kim was sincere in that moment, so much so that he wasn't sure he could have said anything more honestly than he did now. He was grateful for the potion and for her kindness. They shook hands and then she said that they had to succeed first. After that, they could make a difference in the world. As she left, she said that if he needed anything else, he could call her anytime. Now his order was always a priority for her. Kim waved her off and thanked her for her kind words. The rear spirit started to mock him and what he had said to her. Then Kim replied that he would fall under the ground in shame right now and suggested they go to training. The next day they moved to the hunting ground on the floor where he was to fight the orcs that had appeared there as soon as they arrived. Kim, upon seeing them, thought that these orcs would be a bit of a problem for him, so he asked the spirit of the rear how they had a plan, to which the spirit asked him to drink a potion. He pulled out his glass of the potion and drank it. He said it tasted nothing special. He could taste lemon in there and it seemed like a little honey. Before Kim could finish his sentence, he felt his whole body paralyzed. He couldn't move. He felt hot and sweaty. He was scared and didn't know what was happening to him. The rear spirit looked at him carefully and realized that the potion had begun to work and said that the alchemy master was, indeed, a master. She had made the potion perfectly. The ghost asked if he liked the feeling. He said he could now count every hair on his body. He wondered if he could clearly feel the drops of sweat running down his skin. The spirit said that was the effect of the miracle potion. It enhanced his perception of reality. He asked if he could feel it. Kim didn't understand what the spirit was telling him. He added that what was crawling in his heart was an aura. It appeared in the body of every hunter who entered the tower. But the hunters usually didn't even feel it and lived their lives as normal. But how easily he controlled the aura was what determined whether he would be a winner or a loser. Kim felt terrible headaches and didn't know how to soothe the pain. The rear spirit explained to him that it was usually achieved by some sort of meditation, but it took too long. The ghost told him that if he didn't have the talent for it, all he had to do was torture his body to get it right. While Kim was trying to achieve the perception, an orc approached him to finish him off. The rear spirit told him to run away from that place, or else the orc would kill him. If he couldn't escape, the monster would make a chop out of him. He told him that if he didn't want to feel pain, he needed to release his aura and use it to fight the monster. He added that he needed to train in real combat. Kim turned around and smiled nervously at the spirit. He called him a damn ghost. He smiled back and wanted him to repeat his words, calling him an inept who couldn't even use his aura. The ghost understood that he was having a hard time, and then he suggested that he start fighting the monster and finish it off, but then the kill count would increase again, and then the old man would hunt him endlessly. He said it was the effect of the miracle drug, but he could see the attack, but his body wouldn't obey him. He could avoid the attack. He said that with such orcs, all attacks were predictable. He needed to concentrate the aura in his legs. Kim replied that, in words, it was easy. He realized that he could avoid the attack if he could move just one step. He tried his best to get his foot to move, and he succeeded. He was able to feel an aura that gave a pulse from his heart into his legs, and he started to run away from the orcs' attacks. He was happy that he was able to avoid death, but it was harder than he thought. The spirit explained to him that it was because his body didn't yet have a sensible channel for the aura to travel through. His body was kind of like a path deep in the forest, but if a proper path was laid there, he would be able to use the aura. He added that right now he could only feel it because of the potion, but normally it was impossible. Kim tried his best to run away from the orc and not kill him. The orc swung his weapon to finish him off. The spirit noted that even though she was working in complete unsanitary conditions, the alchemy master's skills were excellent. Kim managed to dodge the orc's attack and wondered what would happen when he could make his pathway. Kim realized with annoyance that the rear spirit was right. He took heart and asked his aura to keep flowing through his veins. He tried to squeeze the most out of their training. He realized that an overgrown, weedy path that no man had ever set foot on was the perfect description of his condition right now. He wondered what would happen if he could overcome it, but the spirit only laughed. The spirit remembered that the old man was able to chop off his head, and he didn't even have time to lift a finger. He said it was alley level. It was a perfect strike. The spirit said that the old man had a long way to go, and he didn't even have time to move a finger. After these words, Kim became angry. He was determined to prove the spirit wrong. He was able to use his aura and get into a fighting stance. He drew his weapon and prepared to kill the orc. Kim jumped high up and tried to plunge his weapon into the orc's body, but he failed. The spirit shouted to him to keep his guard up. It told him that the orc had very thick skin. The spirit prompted him to focus his aura on the tip of the blade, but then he thought that was too difficult for him. Then he asked him to just direct all of his aura to the end of the blade. Kim did his best to follow the rear spirit's instructions. He concentrated and directed all his aura to the end of the blade, and he managed to pierce through the orc's thick skin. He said he was in unbearable pain. The ghost knew he felt pain. He said it was because of how carelessly he had used his aura, even though the channeling was not well established. The spirit explained to him that his weakened body was on the verge of death. He had brought his body to such a state only to kill one orc. He considered it a shame. He smiled and said that he liked how he was able to bend his aura like a spring at the end of the battle. He praised him for that and said that a hunter should always fight wisely. Kim lay there and couldn't even move. He said he didn't want to hear from him. The spirit saw that he was hurting to death and that the pain was driving him crazy. He said he would have felt better if he had died. He added that in any other case, he wouldn't have insisted on such a workout, and that the old man drank such a potion too. But he meditated and didn't break his body the way Kim did. Kim got mad at him, but the spirit said that if he died, he could be reborn. He thought this skill was incredibly cool. He said he'd be fine no matter what harsh training method he used, and he envied him. The spirit warned him that if he killed himself, he would have an increase in his kill count. Then he suggested using a method that would not change his kill count. He said with a smile that he had already experienced once how to use the aura. He felt that at this rate, 100 deaths would be enough to learn how to control it. He said that 100 deaths started with the first one. After he said that, a huge orc appeared behind him and swung his weapon and prepared to attack. Kim couldn't do anything and the orc killed him. It was his first death. Kim woke up and felt a powerful headache. He got up and saw that the rear spirit was next to him. He was surprised that he was able to get to this place with him. Kim realized that the spirit was reborn with him. He was still tired, and he bent down a bit and explained to the spirit that he had briefly gotten into this space when he was dying, and for now, he called it nothingness. The spirit said it was amazing. Kim told him that he kept hearing the system notify him that he was back for hours. It was just like those times with the summer spirit and the holy sword. The system notified him that the skill conditions had been met due to death. Kim added that in the nothingness he was still copying the skills of the opponent who killed him. They noticed that Kim could copy the skill of the orc that killed him. They couldn't believe that monsters had skills too. It was unbelievable. He had to choose a skill card. Kim stood and thought about which card he should choose. The spirit asked him who was running the tower. The ghost was not happy that the tower ignored him, an incredible hunter, and gave divine skills to such an amateur. The ghost couldn't believe that the tower had rewarded him so much. He screamed that this was the downfall of the entire hunter culture. Kim looked at the monster's skills and couldn't decide which one to take, and finally decided to take any of the cards. Kim reached for a card. The spirit asked why he took that card. Kim explained. He didn't care what he chose, but the spirit thought it was a good chance to get a useful skill. Kim said it was impossible to know which card had the better skill. The spirit asked why he didn't know which skill was better. Kim thought why exactly today the spirit didn't understand him. He explained that the color of the cards were the same. He could only see one side of the card, so he didn't know where the skill was better. The ghost listened to him and informed him that he could see the back side of the skill card, which was hidden from his eyes. Kim, hearing this, was shocked and forgot about his headache. Kim thought that the skill cards always moved so that he could only see the backside, and if he moved his head, nothing changed. He realized that the spirit of the rear could fly as he would like, so he could see the opposite side of the card. The spirit was a little surprised that Kim didn't believe he had seen the map. He added that since he was a child, he had been known for his eagle vision, and as he got older, it had become almost clairvoyant. Kim rejoiced and realized that the spirit of the rear was a real find for him. He ignored the ghost's nerves and asked him to tell him what the skills were. The spirit agreed and informed him that he would read the skills to him just once. He briefly described the skills and asked which one he liked better. He said that if he hadn't stopped him, he would have picked the worst skill, but Kim thought both skills were bad, but he had to pick one of the skills. The spirit tried to dissuade him from taking the skill he chose, to which Kim replied that the decision was made. He thought the skill shvik was better than patronizing fertility. He saw Kim reach for the skill card, but the rear spirit tried to stop him and think about it some more. Then Kim smiled and asked if he agreed with him. The spirit tried to understand what he was talking about, but Kim had already picked, and copied the skill of the monster that killed him. The ghost asked him not to pick a card, but Kim was determined. Kim woke up on his bed and was pleasantly surprised it was very soft, just what he expected from a merchant association guild. He thought that such a comfortable bed, he felt very light in body and mind. He could see that the spirit was angry with him. Then Kim said that he didn't understand who could have chosen the patronage of fertility. He asked him to calm down and suggested that he go hunting again. The spirit came to him and told him that he had thought about it and he could practice lotus pose in peace. He thought that dying was very painful and he should not risk his life anymore. He suggested he sit down and meditate. He would help him to know his aura in 6 months, but Kim didn't listen to him. He was already focused on achieving results faster and more efficiently in the hunting grounds on the tower floor. The spirit was angry because Kim ignored him. When they got to the right place, Kim drank the miracle potion again and had something to say to the ghost. The spirit assumed he had changed his mind about hunting and decided to meditate. Kim drew his weapon and said that he had noticed that the spirit only called him by his first name when it was to his advantage, but the rest of the time he was Kim the zombie, and as of late, he had been calling him by his first name. He added that he was giving a friendly signal for the spirit to get rid of the habit, and rushed to attack the orc standing next to him, using his aura to finish him off faster. Kim noticed that the orc's movements were just as slow as last time. He could see perfectly well that the orc was about to attack him, and he would have time to dodge his attack. Then he used his new skill. He decided to use the Chwick skill to test the orc's reaction. He looked at him with a surprised look. He Chwicked back at him, and at that moment Kim finished him off. When he dealt with the monster, the spirit was very angry at him. He yelled that he knew he had chosen that skill to trick and kill orcs. He said he didn't think about their feelings at all. The spirit said that innocent orcs had to suffer because of people like him. He didn't understand why the tower gave him such skills. Kim told him not to overexert himself. They needed to move on. Kim said it was time to conquer the tower floor. A week later, Kim found himself facing the boss of the floor's hunting grounds. He was facing a battle with the Great Goblin King. He looked at the boss and prepared to attack. Kim began to focus his aura around him before attacking. He triggered the skill he had learned earlier. He didn't wait long and rushed to attack the Goblin King. Kim approached him and shouted the name of the skill. It was a secret word for goblins. The king, hearing it, was shocked that someone other than him could use such a perfect language of the great king. He managed to make a precise attack and kill the Goblin King. Kim thought that for the last week the king was his strongest opponent. He wished him a happy journey, calling him an honorable opponent. The ghost watching him said he was mocking him. He didn't understand why he needed so much sentimentality from killing one monster. Kim looked at him and said he barely defeated him for lives, and he was entitled to sentiment. The ghost said that he was only telling him the facts, and besides, he thought this battle was not something to be proud of, to which Kim confidently replied that it was, and began to open the skill window. Kim explained to him that he had fought for the right skill, which he had gotten at the cost of his lives. Kim couldn't believe that goblins like orcs were also worried over nothing. The spirit answered him that goblins were worried about nothing because they were almost no different from humans. Kim looked at him and questioned him. He couldn't hear what he said. The spirit said it was just thinking out loud. Suddenly, Kim saw a system notification that informed him that his existence was becoming more remarkable. Kim couldn't understand what it meant. The system notified that Kim Conjure's hunter level had been upgraded. His skill slot had been expanded, and his rank was now E. Kim thought that this had finally happened. The system wished that he would always have good luck. The spirit started going through the options. He thought it was flames, then thought it was blood. Eventually he was confused. Kim was surprised. He thought it was just the effect of the level increase. Then the spirit said it appeared for a reason. He explained that it was a clue. Depending on what effect appeared during the level up, the aura type was assigned. He said that the summer spirit's aura type was definitely fire. The spirit said that the aura type usually depended on the trauma of the hunter. Although it wasn't necessarily a bad memory, but it definitely had to be a significant event. It was reflected in the aura type. It was something subconscious. He looked at him carefully and said that in his opinion fire was not his type of aura. He confidently said that his type was blood. Kim looked at him and asked what type of aura the holy sword had. The spirit did not hesitate to answer that his type of aura was moonlight. The spirit said that the old man had gotten lost in the mountains as a child. He didn't want to die, so he persevered and climbed to the very top of the mountain. He remembered that the holy sword had told him that the moon shining in the cloudless sky was simply beautiful. He knew that the moon itself did not shine, but only reflected the light of the sun, and he decided that he would like to shine like the moon. The spirit reported that the holy sword said those words when he was only 12 years old, and he carried them through his life. Then Kim thought the old man was definitely insane. After this story, the rear spirit said that Kim was able to clear the floor, and it was time to go to the floor. Then Kim asked if he couldn't just go straight to destroy the floor boss. Hearing these words, the spirit thought that Kim had gone crazy. He asked him if he was getting cocky too soon, to which Kim calmly replied that he wasn't getting cocky. He wanted to clear the floor sooner. The spirit of the rear only got angry at his words. He looked at him and asked if he knew how many years more talented and capable hunters spent on one floor alone. Kim replied that if he couldn't pass a floor in 2 lifetimes, he would call him a teacher. The rear spirit was interested and didn't believe that Kim could pass a floor in just 1 death. The spirit said that a man who spent lives to kill the chief goblin could not pass the floor for lives. He added that he was always tough in a bet, but Kim said he had one condition. Kim asked him to tell him without hiding anything what skill the 10th floor boss had. The spirit looked at him and said since he was only interested in that, but then Kim came up with another condition for him. He said that if he won the bet, the rear spirit had to call him Mr. Kong Ja and address him as respectfully as possible. The spirit agreed and their bet began. The rear spirit thought that Kim had gained just one foul skill, and now he thought he was worthy of challenging the great sword lord. This ticked him off. After a short thought, the spirit agreed. He said that he wouldn't be able to defeat the floor boss, and he would have to call him teacher for the rest of his life. He remembered that he couldn't die, so he would take forever to tell him that he was his teacher. After they did their best to take each other out, they approached a guard who asked in surprise if he was going to challenge the boss alone. He pointed out that solo hunting was simple suicide. The guard told him that a sweep group of strong and brave members of the Black Dragon Guild tried to pass the boss, but they failed. Kim replied that the management itself had ordered to let in all willing hunters. He apologized to the man and explained that all the hunters entering on the floor were recorded by him personally, and those in charge at the management would then check his records. The guard said that to them he would be a scumbag for letting a man die. He asked to feel sorry for him in this situation. Kim didn't know what he had to do now to get to the floor. The rear spirit was furious that they were not allowed on the floor. He suggested that he eliminate the guard and go to the floor. Kim then told the guard that he knew how hard they had worked, and he was right not to let him in. Kim looked at him and said he had come because he wanted to die. He said that a year ago his lover had died, and he had recently been diagnosed at the alchemy castle. He was terminally ill. He only had 6 months to live. He said that even though he was low level, but he was still a hunter, and instead of waiting for his end in the alchemy castle clinic, he wanted to fight monsters until his last breath. The guard was touched by his life story. Then Kim handed him a pouch and told him that he was saving up for the cure and handed him all his savings. But the guard replied that he couldn't accept it. Kim explained to him that the money would have been gone anyway and he wanted to leave with ease, leaving nothing behind. Oh, asked the guard that he not record him and let him pass. He saw that the guard was already willing to do anything for him. Then Kim added that it was his last wish as a hunter. The guard couldn't stand it and let them pass, saying he didn't see anything. Spirit couldn't believe that the guard believed what Kim had told him. He thought they were just joking. But when he let them through, Kim said the end justified the means. And he just needed to get to the floor. They headed for the doors, and Kim remembered that the floor was the first one that had managed to sweep away the summer spirit. Then he decided it was time to write a legend even more incredible than his. As Kim entered the floor, he saw many dolls standing in the fire asking him to play with them. They asked him what he would like to play with, and that's when Kim realized it would be harder than he thought. Kim began to concentrate his aura around him, so the fire wouldn't get to him. There was no turning back, and he was determined that he would play with them. The system wished him luck, and his battle began. Everyone in Babylon knew that the Black Dragon was the strongest guild since the opening of the tower. However, they had suffered their 30th defeat in the sweep, and reporters were trying to figure out why they couldn't pass the floor. Reporters from all over the city came to the tower in time to ask about the reason for the failure. From the guild representatives coming out of the tower, the guild had said that there was no flaw in their skills. They were just unlucky. Summer's spirit laughed hard when he heard her words. He was successfully able to sweep the floor alone and told the Black Dragon Guild that luck was also a skill. Kim remembered this interview, which became known as shaming the weaklings in the future. He wondered, ahead of all the brave hunters alone, why only the summer spirit was able to clear the floor. He realized that the method of clearing the floor stage was simple. He needed to find a real doll somewhere in the manor and destroy it. The rear spirit noticed that around the doll was not just flames, it was a hellfire created from the aura. The rear spirit explained to him that even if he surrounded his body with his own aura, he wouldn't be able to last longer than minutes in the flames, after which death would await him. However, the infernal flames did not cause any damage to a hunter with a fire-type aura, so the summer spirit could safely walk around and search for the real doll. It pissed him off that he went around afterwards and boasted that luck was also a skill. The spirit said that Kim himself lived off luck, but Kim didn't understand what luck the spirit was talking about. He was literally burning out on this floor. He told him that he was having a hard time himself right now. Even with the aura, the spirit was glad he was running out of time. The ghost informed him that the holy sword could last in the flames for minutes. He trained hard to hold the aura for an hour, and then he would be able to climb the floor. The spirit was angry that Kim decided to sweep the floor without training. The spirit said that he only had 2 lives left, or he would have lost their bet. He asked what he was going to do next. Kim said that all he had to do now was die, and after he was reborn, he would figure something out. The ghost said there were only 2 ways to clear the floor. Either find the real doll with a 1 in a million chance, or control the aura so well that it would hold up until he destroyed the rest of the dolls. The spirit was sure he wouldn't be able to get through the floor in his 2 remaining lives. He realized that his level of aura control wasn't good enough to last a full hour, but Kim replied that there was a 3rd way to clear the floor. Kim added that they'd soon see whose take after he'd wasted a life, but while his aura still had seconds to spare, he decided to try and grab one of the dolls. He had plenty of time to think which doll to take. He quickly walked over to the closest one and caught it. The doll replied that he had made the wrong choice, and she wasn't real. As soon as the doll spoke, it began to melt in his hands as if it was made of wax. He still had seconds left, but he didn't try to catch the doll anymore. He was terrified of what had become of the doll. Kim was shocked and couldn't understand at all why the boss scene had to be directed that way. It was creepy. The rear spirit replied that no one could understand the real intent of the tower. The rear spirit said that he could ask that sick pervert who gave a rogue skill. To such a slacker, Kim looked and said that now he was hurt by his words. While they were talking, his time was up, and he was enveloped in hellfire. He was unbearably hot. And then the spirit of the rear said he was an even bigger pervert than the tower. Kim asked him to let him die in peace. The spirit laughingly said that he was forever saying he wanted to be a badass hunter, but he himself just chose to burn alive. He asked him to recognize the fact that he was a real pervert. Kim died and fell into oblivion again. He reached the skill condition and was able to copy a random monster skill. He got the Hellfire Maiden skill. Kim looked at the spirit and asked if he remembered his promise. The rear spirit smiled at him and replied that he remembered his promise. He asked if he looked like someone who would break his promise made in a bet, and he started to look for a suitable skill card for him. He pointed him to a gold card, saying that it was really cool. The spirit advised him to take that particular card, which would be useful in passing the tower. The spirit said that it was the only S-level skill that this boss had. He said that by choosing it, he would be able to summon hellfire at any time, which destroyed him. He noticed that Kim was thinking about something. He asked him what it was about, to which Kim said that he didn't understand, but for some reason this skill bothered him. He was wondering why it was happening. Kim said that the skill was definitely worthy, but it made him feel dreary. Then he asked the spirit to read him other skills. The spirit didn't understand why he needed it, but he agreed to do it. The rear spirit gathered all the skill cards around him and read to him there was maze, puppet submission, remote control, trap setting, and he was about to name the last skill, but he was stopped by Kim. Kim said he had made up his mind, but the spirit tried to talk him out of his choice again. He began to more actively advertise a gold card that allowed him to create hellfire, but Kim refused it, saying he needed another card. He thought he should have suspected something wrong from the start. One real doll among thousands of others. The real doll was the organizer possessing a fire aura, so this doll didn't burn. But he wondered why the fake dolls didn't burn either, and he soon realized that the answer was one. The organizer had a skill that allowed the objects he would choose not to burn, and Kim reached for the map. He exercised his choice and copied the skill. The rear spirit was displeased with his choice and thought it was a dumb game. Kim then recommended he practice addressing him Mr. Kim Kanja, because he would win their bet. Kim thought that now that he was back, he would be able to explore the estate until he found the real doll. He thought that things were getting too easy for him, and he thought that wasn't really good. He couldn't go straight back to his home. He had been penalized for using the skill, and now the trauma of the enemy that had killed him was starting to replay for him. Kim didn't understand what trauma the system was talking about. The system replayed for him the trauma of the Hellfire Maiden. A little hungry girl knocked on the door. She asked for some bread, but the evil man closed the door in front of her. He was not happy with the beggars coming to him since morning. She went to all the houses in the hope of getting some food, but everywhere she was refused. People were dissatisfied that there were too many orphans in the neighborhood moreover. Because of the shortage, they themselves had nothing to eat. The girl told everyone that she wanted to eat, but people only got angry at her and sent her away from everywhere. She asked only for a little bread. People looking at her could not understand where they came from in their town. She was walking down the street not paying attention to the evil people who dreamed of being picked up off the street. But she was just trying to get some food. The girl did not notice the man standing there and crashed into him. The girl looked up in horror and apologized to him. The man smiled and leaned over to her. He asked her where her parents were. He looked at her and realized that she was very hungry and that she was an orphan. He thought that she must have had many illnesses. He invited her to come with him, telling her that he was a doctor and that his estate had many of her friends with whom she could heal and play. The girl, unsuspecting, went with him, hoping he would feed her and cure her, but he put her in a cage and restrained her hands. The girl asked him when she could go out and play. She told him she was very hungry. The man thought that those who were looking for food because they were hungry were real animals. They were born like animals, so they had to grow up like animals. He pulled out a knife and said he knew the orphans well. They didn't work, making excuses for being small. He thought they were small vermin spreading the plague, hanging around from village to village. The man said he was a guard and a doctor, and he was ready to rid this country of the likes of them. They offered her repentance, after which he showed the cages with the children to the rest of his organization, saying that their starvation was the fault of the unfortunate orphans. They thought they were the children of witches who were vermin to their country. They sacrificed children to the gods, saying they were doing it to save their land. They were a sect that exterminated orphans. They had hardly any victims left, and they needed to replenish the cages. Until the next ceremony. The girl in the cage couldn't understand why they kept taking her friends, why they kept hurting them. She only had one question: why? Kim couldn't understand what was happening. He asked the spirit if he had seen what he had seen, to which the spirit replied that he had seen everything from beginning to end. He didn't know that Kim was here either. Kim assumed that it was only their consciousness that was in this place. But that wasn't the point. The spirit of the rear couldn't believe that there were such monsters among humans. He was incredibly angry and believed that they were the ones who had to repent for their sins. Kim couldn't believe that this was a real floor boss scene. He couldn't even think that a monster when was an ordinary human. He was amazed at what he had to go through. The rear spirit said that it wasn't with all monsters. It was mostly only with bosses. It was the boss that was created based on real events from other worlds. He added that the living creatures, heroes and the like, were all from other worlds. And starting from the floor, this kind of thing could be more and more common. Hearing this, Kim was shocked and asked why he hadn't told him about it before. The spirit replied that he hadn't asked him about it, but this was the first time he had seen the original himself. He only knew that they were from another world, but he knew nothing about their past. But now that he had seen everything with his own eyes, he felt like a complete nothing. They had never thought about the fate of monsters. He realized that somewhere in the universe, something like this was happening all the time. They heard someone shouting that there was a fire in the manor. They started running away from the fire. Some of them wanted to grab valuables. Kim tried to stop them, but no one heard him. Kim got in their way and didn't understand where they were all running to. There were still children in the basement who were shackled and locked in cages. He was shocked that everyone had forgotten about them. The orphans saw the fire coming towards them. They were trapped in a death trap. They were screaming and calling for help as hard as they could. They said they had done nothing wrong. They just wanted to play with their friends. They didn't need anything else. When the action was over, Kim sat on the bed and couldn't recover from the horror he had seen. The spirit said they had watched a very sad story, but they couldn't do anything to help. Kim was surprised that was the first thing the spirit said to him. The spirit looked at him and said there was nothing he could do. Reality was full of disappointment. He said the boss was a common monster, and the original children had been dead for a long time in their world, and it had all happened a long time ago, and there was nothing they could do about it. The ghost said that if it had happened in the tower, he could have died 1,000 times in hopes of saving them. He said that these were just the events of another world and another era. Nothing could be fixed anymore. He just needed to find the right doll and kill it. He said after that he had to go up a floor, and there he had to mop things up. If he was determined to be the best hunter, he needed to realize that. Kim replied, that's what the summer spirit would have thought. Kim said the summer spirit must have found the real doll and finished it off. He wouldn't hesitate even if he saw the boss's injury. The rear spirit couldn't understand what he was getting at. He was determined that he wouldn't become like the summer spirit. Then the rear spirit asked him what he was going to do. He asked him to stop acting like a child because he was afraid of becoming a villain like the rear spirit went on to say that he needed to get rid of the boss and clear the stage to continue going through the tower. Kim turned around and angrily asked who was so determined to kill the boss. Kim couldn't stand it and gave free rein to his feelings. He thought he was being a fool. He said they were both fools for just trying to kill monsters. He blamed himself for not seeing further than his nose. He remembered the S-class skill that the rear spirit insisted on. Then Kim read the skill description to him. That resentment, his long-held grudge, his ignored plea, his unfulfilled wish, it all needed to be burned. Kim continued and said, just wish, and the heavens would open, unleashing a fiery inferno on the earth from an aura within a radius of kilometers. No one would be able to leave this inferno without your permission. He asked if he thought this was strange. The spirit didn't understand what Kim meant. He asked him to explain it to him. It wasn't that hard. Kim told him to pay attention to the last part, where it said that no one could leave hell without your permission. Kim asked how the black dragon came back with the whole cast without defeating the boss. The rear spirit also thought about this question. Then Kim said there was only one answer. The boss let them escape from the floor. He realized that the stage that no human had been able to get through yet, and all the local boss wanted from the people coming in was connected. He just wanted to be played with. That's when Kim approached the dolls and agreed to play with them. Be careful with fire in both dream and reality, and walked confidently through the hellfire. The dolls, seeing that he wasn't hot, asked if he could play with them, to which Kim smilingly replied that of course he could. He happily offered to play hide and seek with them, but he immediately warned them that he had never lost hide and seek as a child, and they had no chance of winning against him. The dolls looking at him thought he was a bit strange. Kim covered his eyes with his hands and started counting so the puppets would have time to hide. He figured someone would play hide and seek with the kids who were tied to their stage and couldn't go anywhere. He opened his eyes and started looking for them all. He found them one by one. They happily said he was wrong and it wasn't her. Then Kim kept looking and didn't give up. After finding them, the dolls melted like wax. Kim didn't stop and continued to play with them. He thought it was more difficult than he thought. The spirit of the rear was watching him and realized it wasn't just a game. It was the resting of their souls. He walked all over the estate and put his hand on each doll, which only repeated that he had made the wrong choice. So he went down to the basement, where another doll sat in a cage, who also wanted him to play with her. Kim opened the cage and putting his hand on her head, said he had caught her, and now the doll would be water. She began to melt, and thanked him for freeing their souls. As the doll melted, Kim saw a happy little boy who couldn't stop thanking him. Now he was finally free from his cage he had spent so many years in. Kim was able to clear the floor without killing anyone. He had saved more than one soul from the eternal captivity. He had accomplished the task and was rewarded with a reward that would have been available within hours of entering the floor. The spirit couldn't understand why he was upset. He said he could have gotten a nice reward for cleaning up the hidden scene. Kim replied that he couldn't have understood him because he had no human feelings. Kim said he just thought that the world was so corrupted. Scenes like this boss's scene helped him realize that all kinds of evil was going on in the world or any other world. There was no difference. The rear spirit sadly added that everywhere there was man there was such evil. They walked in silence and each thought about his own. But the spirit couldn't stand it and said that this didn't suit him. He wasn't used to being upset and he wanted to set himself up for positivity. He said what was more important was that Kim was incredible. He talked about how he beat the boss with his own method without listening to anyone else. He said Kim was worthy of praise. Kim looked at him and thought the spirit looked suspicious. Then the spirit said that he always praised when he had something to praise, and this time he had done it on his own, not by luck. The rear spirit smiled at him and said that they were partners and should be happy together when something good happened, and right now they should be happy that they had successfully cleared the floor. As soon as the spirit finished speaking, they saw a celebratory salute in the sky. The system notified everyone the floor stage had been, and that the floor stage would open in an hour. After this announcement, Kim pulled out his phone, which was literally bursting with chat messages, where all the people were trying to figure out who was able to clear the floor. Who was this hero? Spirit, looking at the countdown clock, said that this was the beginning of the main. He had only seen the exact same scene once in his lifetime. Kim, trying to back him up, said he had it the second time too. Kim went into the chat room to read the latest news. The chat room was actively discussing the floor sweep. They thought it was the Black Dragon Guild. Others thought it wasn't them. This was the #1 topic in the chat room. He was reading and smiling. The rear spirit noticed this and asked him how he felt going from being a supporting character to being the main character, to which Kim replied that he felt murderous. Kim added that it seemed as if he had accomplished absolutely everything he could have wished for. The spirit smilingly told him that was a delusion. He had only cleared the floor and there was still more to come. But the spirit said that he was now the closest thing in his world to the top, and now all he had to do was actually climb to that top. Their conversation was interrupted by a guard running at them and trying to stop him. The guard barely managed to stop them, and breathing heavily, asked if he was the one who had managed to clear the floor. Kim pretended not to understand what he was talking about. Then the guard explained to him what he meant. He said that he was the only one who had challenged the floor today. He said that it was chaos, and that his superiors kept asking him who had managed to clear the floor. Kim asked if it was him, then what he would do. The guard hesitantly replied to him that he at least introduced himself, to which Kim said that he had personally accepted gold from him to make sure everything was kept secret from people. The guard then began to beg him to at least give him his nickname, but he was having none of it. The rear spirit praised him, saying that the price of the name was by nature very high, and now it was their turn to look for it. And then Kim said he realized something, namely the reason why he had praised him. Kim said that they agreed that if he could pass the boss for lives, he would start calling him Mr. Kim Kanja, and he actually managed to pass him for lives. The spirit didn't want to call him that, so he told him that they were partners, which meant they had an equal relationship, the man who conquered the floors, and the man who would challenge the floors. That was what partners meant. Kim turned around and resolutely told him that from now on. The spirit of the rear was to call him Mr. Kim Kanja, and no other way, and that was how he was to talk for the rest of his life. In the cafe, people were actively discussing the main news. They were trying to find out who had cleared the floor. There was no information about it on the news. They thought it was the Black Dragon who kept everything secret. Some thought it was the Holy Sword. Kim drank his drink and was completely calm. He asked the rear spirit if the victory wasn't sweet, just like his caramel macchiato. He thought that his headphones were broken, and he couldn't hear the answer from the rear spirit. Kim understood that the spirit didn't want to talk to him after losing the bet. He couldn't call him Mr. Kim Kanja. The rear spirit was standing far away from him, and looking at the wall, Kim saw him and said he could hear him now. He said he thought he had gone deaf, thereby making the divine Mr. Kim Kanja worried, and said that was not the way to do it. Kim said that now they could communicate less formally. Respectful manner, the moment he called him master, then the rear spirit asked him to just kill him. The rear spirit begged him to get a new skill and put it into the sword constellation slot. After that, he would be able to return to the old man. Then Kim asked him weren't they partners for life. Kim said they had been together forever. He looked at his watch and thought it had been an hour and a half since the floor sweep was announced. Then he noticed the cat. He didn't expect such an important person would come to see him in person. He picked up the cat and started playing with it. He figured that for now, no one knew what kind of cat it was. He decided that he would pretend that he too was unaware of who it was. Kim continued stroking the cat. He realized that even though the cat was somewhat unusual, the acting was amazing. A man came up to him and asked if he was a hunter named Kim Kanja. He looked away from the cat and turned his head towards the person who asked him this question. He saw various guild representatives standing quietly waiting for his answer. Kim thought he was just wondering how long it would take to find his identity. Kim showed them his ID and they abruptly started reporting that this was the man they were looking for and that they had found him at the cafe. They had orders to lure him to one of their guilds. The first guy to come up to him and introduce himself. He said he was a recruiter for the Vigilante Guild. He immediately started talking about the privileges that would await him in their guild. But his speech was interrupted by Kim. He apologized for that and asked to be allowed to say two things. First, he asked not to reveal his name to the press. He didn't want the reporters to pester him with their questions. One of the representatives asked how long to keep his name secret. He said that now reporters from all the newspapers were snooping around the guilds, so even if they hid it, they would still find out. Kim replied that they needed to keep it a secret until the clock that counted down was 0. He didn't want to get caught by the reporters before entering the floor. The reps said they could do that. Then Kim told them what the second point was. He said they were in a public place and asked them to take care of the other visitors first. Each of the representatives started to do whatever they could to make him feel comfortable talking to them. Some went to negotiate a lease for the whole cafe. They only needed 1 hour. Others went to the visitor asking them to leave the cafe. They settled everything and after buying drinks sat down at the negotiating table. Kim wanted to know what terms they were willing to offer him. He was ready to listen to all of them and would choose the best option for himself, offered him thousands of gold as an advance payment. The representative of the League of Adventurers sitting near him said that the vigilantes could see that they were beggars and offered him a position in the guild leadership in addition to the advance payment. Kim listened attentively to their offers, but while he remained silent, he wondered how highly he could be evaluated. He saw how the guild representatives tried to offer better terms than their competitors. He thought that they were quite oppressed by the name of the Holy Sword, a self-righteous number in the rank, who didn't join any of the guilds. Because of him, people questioned the need for guilds. Kim realized that in such circumstances behind the hero who made a noise as good as Holy Sword, all the guilds wanted to get him. Otherwise their guilds could end, and while everyone was arguing, suddenly the cat offered him thousands of gold. The cat jumped from his arms and the guild leader of the Merchant Alliance, the Countess, appeared in front of them, who was ranked in rank. In addition to the money, she offered him the position of deputy guild leader. Kim, taking off his headphones, thought that now the serious negotiations had really begun. It was as if he had been waiting for the Countess to appear. And her offer, she immediately noted that he was defiant, and didn't seem surprised that the cat had turned into a human. He replied that he could even see ghosts, but the Countess took it as a joke, and noted that he was calm enough to joke. Kim couldn't believe that the hunter in front of him was, for she was the richest in the tower. The Vigilante Guild representative was outraged at her suggestion. He said it was over the top. He didn't deny his accomplishments in mopping up the floor, but he didn't know how impressive his skills were. She looked at him. He apologized and fell silent. The Countess said that in that case, if they didn't want to keep apologizing, they should have called their superiors. She apologized and said that she wouldn't be able to have a dialogue with the representatives. He added that if there was one among them who could offer more thousands, he could stay. But there were no such people among them, and they left the cafe, going to get their heads. After a few minutes, someone was heard calling obscene words to the Countess, who unceremoniously drove away all the representatives. The first to enter was the head of the Guild of the Gate of 1,000 Faceless Poisonous Snake, and began to shout at the Countess. Behind him entered the cafe, the head of the Pantheon Guild, Pantheon Inquisitor Heretic. She said that this time they were behind the Merchant Alliance Guild and that they had to admit that it was their blunder. The deputy head of the Vigilante Squad Guild, the Holy Knight, replied that the word blunder was inappropriate. Their duty was to prevent chaos among the hunters, and the Countess had offered too much compared to the others. Kim noticed that the only one who entered the cafe and didn't say anything was the head of the Black Dragon Guild, the Black Witch. She was silent and just looked at him. He could see that she didn't care what her competitors said. The Countess smiled and said that it had been so long since they had gathered in one place. Their joint sweep of the second floor was like the day before yesterday. Time seemed inexorable to her. The poisonous serpent asked her to be quiet, otherwise he would use force. The poisonous serpent was incredibly angry. He couldn't believe that she had offered him thousands of gold and the position of deputy guild head. He thought it was too generous an offer that no one would be able to override. The heretic offered to get everyone a coffee. She said that coming to the cafe and not ordering something was outrageous. Heads of the major guilds in charge of the tower couldn't do that. She sat down at the table and said she would have mocha. The Night Saint said she would prefer an iced latte. The Black Witch wanted a hazelnut latte, hot, and asked for a shot of coffee grande. The Countess smiled and ordered a warm Americano. The poisonous serpent didn't understand how they could drink coffee in peace when the floor had been cleared, and there was something not clear in the world. He was shocked that they were going to drink coffee in peace. Then Heretic Maid ordered him a dark espresso. Heretic placed the order, and the waiter wrote down preferences and went to make the coffee. All the guild heads looked at him carefully and thought, what would the hunter Kim Konya choose? Kim thought that the guild heads had replaced the guild representatives, and it wasn't an accident they were testing him. The spirit said he shouldn't be afraid they were scaring him so much. Kim replied that compared to being burned alive, it wasn't scary. He asked for a menu and said he had recently had a macchiato, so he didn't want coffee. He ordered himself a hot chocolate. He wanted to show them that he had a reason why he could be so unafraid of them. The head of the Pantheon Guild said that it was surprising that no activity had been seen behind him before the floor sweep. It was quite a sudden change for them. Kim thought that even if he pissed them off, the worst they could do was kill him. The rear spirit supported him, saying that dying was his talent. To which Kim replied that he was grateful but would not spare him. The Countess said he wasn't so quiet. He had recently won her guild's lottery. He added that he was lucky and fearless, probably had decent skills, and with such qualities he could succeed. Poison Serpent didn't understand how the person who was able to conquer the floor was a mere rookie. He suggested that they end this pointless farce and just settle with him. The Black Witch said that it was all unimportant, the fact that one of them's authority had been undermined. She suggested that they sort things out amongst themselves a little later. She looked at him and asked him directly which guild he was going to join. She added that if none, she asked him to say so right away so they could prepare for the press reaction. Kim wanted to know what would happen if he was going to join one of the guilds. The Black Witch said that fierce bidding would have started then. They had wasted a lot of time on the floor, but because he was able to break through the floor, gave them back a chance to prove the value of the tower to the outside world. It was a terrible experience. Chance to attract from the outside world not only people from the lowest levels, but also people from other categories. It was an opportunity to light a fire in the hearts of the hunters. They didn't know what kind of world awaited them from the floor, so curiosity would become the energy preserving the tower. Kim added that the difficulties with food would also be solved. The Black Witch said that it was already getting hard for them to provide food for the tower with only a number of things that were obtained from the floor. The head of the market kept the trade channel with the outside world open 24/7, but that was no longer enough. They needed other goods. The Black Witch with a serious face added that they needed to attract adventurers to the world beyond the floor to find useful items there. She said that to do this, they needed something that would draw a lot of outside attention to the tower, an icon that would loudly announce that a new age had been ushered in. Kim couldn't believe it was him. Kim remembered that the same icon, the Black Dragon, had once an assassination attempt on the same icon. He himself didn't understand why, but since she was an enemy of the summer spirit, then he and the head of the Black Dragon had to get along. He smiled and realized that the guild that would get him would be the symbol of the new era, while the other guilds would have to live in the shadows. Kim said that he was too embarrassed to do that to the other guilds, so he wanted to handle the matter differently. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a deck of cards. He told them that he would join the guild of the person who could beat him at poker. He said he didn't want advances or statuses. He wanted something else. Kim said that if he won, he would be able to join all the guilds that were here at the same time. They were shocked to hear this. But that wasn't all. He was willing to join their guilds on the condition that outwardly he would be a member of the guild, but in reality, they would all be on equal footing. Now the choice was up to them. The Countess laughed and said that the young man who had only one floor was asking for the same position as them. She found the offer interesting and agreed to it. The head of the Pantheon Guild said that if there was no cheating, she was also fine with it. The poisonous serpent added that skills were forbidden. Otherwise, they would have an advantage. A person caught using a skill would automatically be disqualified. The Holy Knight said that their guild was a pauper guild. So, if it came to bidding, it would be a failure. The Black Witch also accepted his offer and the game began. Spirit of the Rear, he had a special offer for him. Kim said that he could spare him the punishment if he helped him and looked at the opponent's cards. The Rear Spirit was overjoyed and immediately agreed. He was willing to do anything to avoid being called Mr. Kong Ja. The Rear Spirit began to actively tell him what cards were in his hand. He told him when to pass and when to bet all his money. Kim knew who was bluffing and who had a strong card. Poison Snake lost and accused him of cheating. He said it never happened, but Kim had never lost once. Even bluffing didn't work on him. He was sure Kim was cheating. Then he asked him for proof. Kim said he could have been a master poker player, and he didn't need to cheat. He added that he accused him without proof, and he was hurt. Then Poisonous Serpent said he was now sure he was no F rank. He informed everyone that he had gone up to E rank yesterday. He just didn't have time to announce it. Kim thanked him for his high praise and said that the head of the gate had run out of all the chips and lost to him. The Poisonous Serpent was very upset. He headed to the table where the losing guild leader of the Pantheon Guild was already sitting. She greeted him and said she was waiting for him and ordered him another cup of coffee. Now there were 3 players left at the gaming table, and after a while the Holy Knight lost. Chips. She smilingly said that she was sure that Stone Face was her strong point. She asked him if he used a mind-reading skill. Kim smilingly answered her that it was either a skill or he just saw through everything, and now he invited her to guess which one he had. The Holy Knight, getting up from the table, said that lately it was getting harder to deal with the newcomers. The Poisonous Serpent saw her and started shouting that he should have watched him closely. He thought he was a rogue, but he was sure he was applying the skills, so he was defeating them. The Holy Knight said that this was known from the beginning of the game, but it was much stranger not to realize it. She said that would a newcomer offer the game without preparation, relying on luck alone. She explained that in fact by his challenge, he had told them that he could beat them without getting caught using skills, and they had all accepted the challenge and its terms. Poison Serpent was shocked to hear this. Then the Holy Knight told him that it was good to use martial arts, but sometimes you had to use your head, because it was too obvious. She said that they wouldn't lose anything from this game anyway. If they won, it would be a real jackpot. But even losing would be a good outcome in its own way. Poison Snake answered her that they must have had some pride. He didn't understand how they could put this youngster on the same level as them, the Holy Knight asked him. Pride would help him feed. The head of the Pantheon Guild said pride would definitely help him finish his espresso. She brought the cup to his mouth and told him to drink it and calm down. Kim looked at the cards and thought only of the game. But suddenly the silence broke, and he heard the Black Witch say that it was a relief to her, but Kim didn't understand what she meant. The Black Witch looked at him and said that it was a relief to them that he could be negotiated with. She said that she was originally from Ukraine, or rather from a place that used to be Ukraine. She said that ever since she had lost her family in the Civil War, she had lived on the run. What with the tower and the outside world, it was very hard. She then asked what he wanted to tell her with that. Kim replied that among the people in the tower, especially those from the first generation, there was no one without their history. He himself was a simple orphan in the tower. The Black Witch told him that the tower was home to her. They never stopped playing and kept raising the stakes. The Spirit of the Rear looked at her cards and informed him that she had a flush. She said no one here cared about your origin. They did everything they could for it. The fact that she was from the Ukraine, or that you were from Korea, the fact that the Poisonous Serpent was from China, it didn't matter in their tower. The Black Witch added that because of the tower they could understand each other's speech. They were all equal here compared to the outside world. People from the outside world thought the tower was a garbage dump. but even amongst a pile of garbage flowers could bloom. She said that when the countdown ended, the press would start hounding him, and then a whole different life would begin, different from the one he had had so far. She wished him to handle the ordeal with dignity. Kim thanked her and looked at his cards. Their game was coming to an end. He was sure he could beat her no problem. His assistant told him what card she had in her hand. Kim told her that he liked to be the center of attention. He wanted to be admired and envied by other hunters. That it was blatant, and that he and the Holy Sword were complete opposites. He remembered that the head of the Black Dragon still had a flush in his hand. He still had nothing to beat her cards with, but he decided to take the risk and bet all his money he was confident. Kim decided to tell them right away that he didn't want honors just for clearing the floor. He was going to conquer floor, 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 and floor. No matter how long it took, he would surely conquer the tower. He added that he respected how dear the tower was to them. He genuinely didn't want to clash with them. He knew it was pointless. Who would go up first? Who was worth the title of protagonist? But Kim thought they were all. He was interested in the world outside the tower, not inside it. He admitted that he didn't care at all about food problems or the needs of the poor. He said that if they needed his name to solve those problems, he would let them use it. In return, he only asked for support in the climb. He wanted to experience the feeling of climbing to the top again. The Black Witch finished listening to him. She exhaled heavily and said that she had been mistaken. Now she saw that she and the Holy Sword were exactly the same. Kim asked if that was a compliment. To which the witch replied that it was a rebuke. They were both insatiable. It was time for them to reveal their cards. The guild leader of the Merchant Alliance reported that the head of the Black Dragon had a flush, and the hunter Kim Kong-ja had a full house. Hence the final winner was the hunter Kim Kong-ja. Kim thanked them for the game, stood up and said that he was counting on the promise of equal treatment. The Black Witch asked if they could have hoped that along with the privileges, he would have taken the corresponding responsibilities. He took a sip of his drink, asked if the duties of a hunter were off the rise. Kim reassured them by saying they could not worry about that. The Black Witch said it was very daring as a newcomer. The game was over, and the rear spirit was now free from his punishment. Now he could call him whatever he wanted, and he was insanely happy calling him a zombie. Kim thought this man was also called a sword lord. Kim was already leaving. He said that the floor would be opening soon and he needed to start getting ready to keep up with the others. She replied that it was still unknown what would be there and she was wondering how he was going to get ready. He smiled and told them that there was a floor-by-floor roleplay waiting for them. He explained to them that he had been given the clue as a reward for clearing the floor, and he didn't know anything else himself. Kim went to town, and amongst the people he heard that there was still no announcement about the floor. Some people were discussing the video of the Holy Sword frowning. That he wasn't the one who cleared the floor, and they were surprised that there was absolute silence on the news. There were rumors going around the city that yesterday somewhere, someone had seen all the guild heads together. People couldn't even imagine who was able to conquer the floor. Kim walked among them and smiled. He liked what was being said about him. Kim saw that there were seconds left on the clock before the floor was opened. People started shouting countdown. And when the time was up, there was a beautiful salute. And they heard the announcement that the training preparations had been completed. He saw a beautiful girl appear in the sky like an angel. She turned to them and congratulated them for cleansing the fire-hell manor. The people were enraptured by her. The rear spirit explained to him that it wasn't an angel. It was a system that would now tell them about the quest. She said that one world needed their help. It was suffering from the oppression of the Demon King. They had to defy him and save humanity. The ghost said that if it existed, it was just a pre-made record. Kim looked at him and asked how he knew all this. But the ghost never told him the answer. She explained that if they wanted to accept this mission, they had to say the phrase relocation. Kim noticed a man running across the rooftops who made an incredible leap right through the girl. The people were disappointed that it was just a hologram that had spoken again and were waiting for one of them to accept the mission and go save humanity. Kim used his aura to enhance his vision to see what kind of person was standing on the roof. He saw that there was a holy sword who was the first to go on the mission. He saw the other hunters begin to move after him. Everyone around him began to move. And before Kim would move, the girl said that from floor to floor, they would face a test of faith. She said that they needed to find the truth, and it would reveal to them the truth about themselves. They needed to know themselves. Her words alarmed him. He didn't understand what she meant by that. Kim looked at her and asked her what she was sorry for. He wanted her to explain her words to him in more detail. She didn't know what kind of creature had created the tower, but it had put a lot of effort into it. And this message had been prepared especially for them. And it was to be looked at with admiration. She thought the tower was a miracle, but they on the floor were so full they didn't forget it. Kim didn't think she was so sensitive. It was a surprise to him. She smiled and said that in the outside world her specialty was music. Kim smiled and decided to joke that because of her profession she didn't see any money at all. To which the Holy Knight replied that it was the bitter truth. The rear spirit called him and asked him to be careful. The rear spirit warned him of the danger. Understand what the spirit wanted him to do. Then he heard reporters approaching him. The Holy Knight apologized and said that apparently they noticed him from behind her and she moved to the floor. Kim was unprepared for the reporters. He realized that this meeting was arranged by the Holy Knight. He asked in horror if that was why she had approached him. She waved him off and said that she was just being quite astute in terms of judging the sincerity of her opponent, and said that he could consider it a demonstration of her interest. Kim saw her practically move to the floor already, to find out from her what she had learned, to which she said that the answer to his question was lurking in his soul. He was incredibly angry with her that she just left him there and ran away. The Rhea spirit told him that he had warned him that she was very suspicious. Kim was left alone with the reporters who peppered him with questions. They wanted to know all the details on the floor sweep. They wanted to know if it was true that he had cleared the floor alone and that he had joined all the guilds at once. He realized that he had to urgently move to the floor, and he thought about what to tell them afterwards. He told them that he would clear the floor and wish them a good job and move to the floor. The Holy Sword was one of the first to arrive on the mission. He didn't understand what was going on there. He saw a huge battle going on. Retreat, people were trying to stop the Demon King's army for the sake of the Agam Empire. The warriors of the Agam Empire fought bravely against the huge and strong orcs who were already starting to defeat them. They realized that if they retreated, the empire would end, but someone shouted that it was impossible. There were too many enemies. The Holy Sword was watching the warriors and couldn't understand what was happening. Everyone who moved with him tried to escape from the battle, but suddenly one of the hunters shouted that had shot arrows at them, and at that moment Kim appeared on the battlefield. Kim, when he saw what was happening, he realized that the stages of training were over, and now such scenes awaited him much more often. Kim saw Knight running towards him, shouting that warriors had arrived who were capable of saving their empire. The Knight ran to them and asked them to help them. And their country, he said that the local port was the last supply route for their army. They had to protect it even at the cost of their lives. Otherwise the capital would fall. He asked that the warriors that came from the other world save their empire, Aegium. This battle would be the first step towards saving the empire. Kim realized that if he didn't pass this quest, the floor wouldn't open. The warriors arrived, trying to see and read the quest. They were worried that a demon king might have actually appeared here. They wanted to know where Aegium's empire even was. They were constantly being attacked by orcs, forcing them to defend themselves. The Howls wanted to be able to read the quest, but because of the orcs they couldn't do it. They didn't understand how to complete the quest. The Holy Sword said that he didn't know all the details, but first they had to kill all the orcs. Everyone who heard him decided to follow him. They thought that this way they had a chance to survive in this place. Kim saw the other hunters follow the Holy Sword, and that they had successfully fought the Demon King's army, but he himself was in no hurry to join the fight. The system greeted him and notified him that he was being rewarded for clearing the floor. He was rewarded with a blessing. He had access to the patronage of the gods of all things. Kim was incredibly happy to receive such a reward. He said that skills ruled this game. Kim learned that the floors of the tower were organized by theme. From floor to floor was training. Here was the city for newcomers to adapt and the prepared hunting grounds. The theme from floor to floor was Warrior, the Demon King. Kim knew that there were only two ways to stop the Demon King's troops. One of them he was going to use but couldn't decide which one suited him better. Kim explained that the first way was to either have enough strength to single-handedly bring down the enemy troops or to lead the Empire's army. The rear spirit thought he would choose the second option and lead the army. He asked him if he had the talent for this option. He wondered if he had ever led an army. Kim replied that he didn't have that talent and had never led an army. but he was sure he could get that talent by using the want to be like you skill. He looked at the Sword Lord and said that he had recently argued that this was a stupid game where the most important thing was luck. The spirit folded his arms and said that he had argued, but he didn't know what he was getting at. Kim answered him that he was going to show him why skills were the most important thing in this game. He opened the skills of all the characters from the floor and noticed that among them were the top people with high skills. The rear spirit tried to stop him. Stronger. He thought that what he was about to do was dishonoring his name, but Kim opened the skill map of the characters that commanded the troops. Kim saw that there were only 3 people with that skill, and then he wanted to know their location on the map and match his location to know which one was closer to get to. He smiled and once again said that skills decided everything in this game. He believed that his not bad privilege had become a dumbed-down privilege, and it was all thanks to his brains. The rear spirit thought he was joking and amusing himself. He couldn't believe. He thought he had an empty head, to which Kim replied that an empty head was also a skill. Kim saw that the closest to him was a blue dot on this map. He arrived at the dot and saw a character there who was the commander. The knight, seeing him, turned around and asked what he could do to help him. Kim, after appreciating his mustache and looking at him seriously, said that since the commander replied that he was ready to help him, and then Kim asked him to kill him. He put his hand on his heart, said that he had a secret weapon, and if he cut short his life, divine protection would descend on the battlefield and help them defeat the army of the Demon King. Commander Sarbazagon was shocked by his request. Kim added that it was a kind of suicide technique, and with this auspices, the Empire would definitely be able to win. But the commander replied that he could not cut short the life of a warrior. Asked him to think what was more important now. If the commander didn't kill him, then he would have to kill himself. He added that this was the only way to save the Empire, and asked him to fulfill his request. He explained to him that he was the commander and in charge of this port, and rather than cut short his own life with his own hands or die at the hands of an evil monster, he wished to die by his hand, the hand of a patriot and most skillful. Commander Kim said they didn't have more time. He asked for it to be resolved faster. The shock. The commander said that even though the welfare of the Empire was important, but to cut short the life of a man who had come from another world with such difficulty. The commander thought that their world was truly cursed. First, the attack of the army of the Demon King that was previously only found in legends. Now taking the life of a brave warrior. He was greatly upset by all these events. He asked God not to forgive them their sins. The commander drew his sword and said that he would try not to hurt him. Kim looked at him and thanked him for that. The commander closed his helmet and asked him to tell him his name. Kim answered him by telling him his full name. The commander, hearing him, thanked him on behalf of the Empire. He swung his sword, and before killing him said that he was a true warrior. Kim copied the commander's skill. Then he was reborn and got into the battlefield. But now he had a skill that would allow him to lead an army. He appeared on a horse and the other players couldn't understand what kind of hunter he was. He knew that there was an expression, above the one who runs, there is the one who flies, and there was another expression, next to the hunter with a blade, there was the hunter with an army, and those words belonged to Mr. Kanja. Kim had the skill of assessing the battlefield, and it was a talent he had created. He said that if one moved straight ahead and turned right, one could see the Demon King. He said that there were monsters nearby, but they were few, could just be swept away. The commander raised his sword and informed the other knights that the goddess warrior would protect them. Kim thought that with skill, he could gain the commander's trust by making himself look like an experienced warlord. A look at the map informed him that they needed to move to the right. Kim realized that the skill had benefited from the mini-card, and to the fact that he had done some advanced investigation, having lived through this day several times. Kim raised the sacred sword of protection of the Riffin, a gem above him, rare, and it was legendary. And then Kim realized that not everything was the merit of one skill. The warrior saw the light coming from the sword and rushed into battle. One legend said that the founder of the Empire Aegeum was blessed by the goddess, but in a time when legend and history were not yet separate, the founder disappeared without a trace, and with him his sacred sword disappeared. After himself, the founder left only a one-line prediction on the day of the manifestation, and a man with the sacred sword in his hands. Any inhabitant of the empire would have no trouble trusting the owner of the sacred sword of protection. All the warriors saw the sacred sword that was in his hands. Kim sat on his horse and raised it high. The warriors were sure that the goddess had not asked for the empire. They praised their city as best they could, and thanked the goddess for the honor she had bestowed upon them. Kim saw them start to run to the attack, he thought. It was immediately obvious what a great benefit there was to mopping up the hidden scene. The spirit of the rear got angry and didn't understand what benefit Kim was talking about, and that he had chosen a very bad subject. He thought the sword was sturdy and shiny. The non-player characters to the floor would jump for joy at the sight of it. Then Kim said that they were not only a tool that gave quests, they were creatures that could be used to complete quests. The other hunters saw him and wondered why he always went with the commander. They knew he was a hunter like them, but they didn't understand why everyone obeyed him. They longed to be in his place. Kim saw them and heard them. Thanks to the use of aura, he was happy to hear that voice of envy. The rear spirit told him that he taught him to use aura to master the sword, not to eavesdrop. He replied that he enjoyed listening to the other hunters talking about him. The commander informed him that the destruction of the left ranks of the Demon King's army was complete. They could move before the main forces. He was sure they could win. The warriors fought their way through the goblin army who were not retreating. They were trying to stop them from getting to their commander. They were protecting their boss monster, the great Goblin King. Monster was huge. He had 2 heads that saw the enemy army approaching him. He ordered his goblins to stop them at all costs. Kim jumped up very high to attack it from the air. He didn't want to waste his strength and fight the other goblins. He triggered a skill was going to kill the boss and finish the battle. He managed to kill the monster with a single attack. He collapsed to the ground and the battle was over. The warriors saw this and shouted with joy that the army of the Demon King was defeated. Killed the enemy commander. The remaining goblins didn't know what to do next. They were surrounded by hunters who thought that, if it came to hunting alone, it was their time, so they decided to kill them all. Kim saw a notification that the stage had been cleared and that they had managed to get through the floor. The hunters were happy that they had managed to do it in just 24 hours. They considered themselves very strong and praised the Black Dragon Guild. The system notification showed all the hunters a list of who made it to the top of the conquerors. The first place was Kim Kanja. The hunters were surprised that the number 1 didn't have an alias, and that the number 2 was the Holy Sword. The hunters thought he was a reclusive master. The rear spirit said that there was no master there. He was just a hunter who only used his empty head. Kim asked him if he recognized that skills were important in this game. The rear spirit turned his back on him and said that he didn't recognize skills and would never recognize them. Then Kim thought that for the spirit, it was his own strength that was important, not skills. Kim didn't want to upset him. He said that they had all contributed together, and that was why they were able to defeat the monsters and save the empire. The commander hesitated and cryptically said that he had worried in vain and explained to him there was once an oracle that lived. He predicted that the army of the Demon King would come, but at the same time, heroes from another world would be. So they should not have been afraid. He told him that he was skeptical because he didn't believe that people called warriors would risk their lives to save another world. So he thought that no one would come to their aid and their empire would collapse. The commander extended his hand for a handshake, smiled, and told him that his fears were not realized. And he asked to be allowed to express his gratitude once again for their help in defeating the monsters. Kim realized that if they were from different worlds but the meaning of the gesture was similar, it was because in the movie, in both this world and theirs, people had 2 hands each. They shook hands, and the commander said that he was counting on them to continue, to which Kim replied that he would try to help them. After the handshake, a portal opened that moved the conquerors to the floor, but only those in the top could enter the floor first, and until the conquerors in the top would receive their reward, the remaining hunters could not enter the floor. The spirit saw Kim move to the floor, and he thought that if only the top ones were summoned there, then the Holy Sword was among them, and he would attack him as soon as he saw him. He wondered what Kim would do in such a situation. Kim smiled and said that he couldn't do anything worse than killing him. He reassured the spirit by saying that he had a countermeasure for that case, and asked him not to worry about it. The transfer was completed, and the top found themselves in the imperial palace of Agam. The Black Witch said that she didn't expect they could be in a place like this. The poisonous serpent was also quite surprised. The rest of the conquerors began to move towards them. And when the heretic inquisitor appeared, he immediately said that Kim had been incredible in the battle with the goblins, and that he was quite shocked. He added that he had thoroughly enjoyed watching his activities on the floor. He didn't think it was possible to use characters like that. He wondered what sword he used in the battle, and if it was a reward for clearing the floor. The heretic inquisitor was quite cheerful. He smiled and said that, as expected, become the leader on the floor with the help of the floor reward. He added that his practical skills were just admirable. Kim embarrassedly replied that there was nothing special about it, and suddenly he was attacked by a holy sword. He attacked it as soon as he appeared in the palace, but his attack was blocked by a heretic inquisitor using the holy art skill body spirit. Kim clutched at his heart. He had not expected the attack at all. The inquisitor heretic stood to his defense and asked the holy sword why he had to scare them like that. He wondered how long ago he had retrained as an assassin. The holy sword held out his blade and told him to get out of his way. He had to kill him. The heretic inquisitor apologized and clarified who exactly he meant when he said he wanted to kill him. Elm's sword said otherwise he would have cut off his hands, to which the heretic replied that he still needed them. He warned him that if he killed Hunter Kim Kanja, the entire guild would be disgraced. He wanted to know why he had threatened him. He replied that he didn't have to explain his reasons for killing the hunter. Heretic realized that the holy sword wasn't going to retreat. He decided to attack him first, and with the help of the holy art spell, Spirit of Displacement, the inquisitor heretic moved the poisonous serpent and the holy knight to attack. They tried to take the old man by surprise, but they failed, and the old man was able to stop their attacks with ease. He told them that they were too weak for him. The poisonous serpent was surprised at the reaction of the holy sword. Dodge. He thought that he had used something to develop such reflexes, to which the old man replied that the poisonous serpent wasn't young either. He replied that aging was the worst process. He said that life was just beginning after the heretic inquisitor said that the poisonous serpent was indeed old, and he was waiting for him to demonstrate what he was really worth. The holy knight asked the poisonous serpent to focus on the opponent in front of them. They were at a disadvantage. The heretic inquisitor said, "Out a way to stop the holy sword." The heretic turned to the countess and asked her for thousands of gold, to which the countess replied that she would only give him the money at interest. But the heretic replied that she had misunderstood him, and he hadn't asked her to lend it to him. The countess became angry and asked if he was now demanding a donation from the businessman, to which the heretic replied that it was still dirty money, and he was asking generously to donate it to the temple, and said that it would open the gate to heaven for her. She said that the robber in him was far more cunning than she was. She provided him with thousands of gold, which sprinkled right back at them, but she didn't know what the heretic needed it for. He used the holy miracle of physical strength enhancement. He chose a holy knight and a poisonous serpent as the objects of enhancement. They each had seconds to attack the enemy. The gold enveloped their hands, and the technique was complete. Kim was shocked at the way the heretic used the gold coins. He realized that now the holy knight and the head of the gate of the 1,000 faceless for seconds would be greatly changed physically. Looked at the holy sword and warned him that even he would have a hard time with the four of them. Him, the countess, the holy knight, and the head of the gate of the 1,000 faceless. They couldn't let him disgrace their guild. He added that the countess's safe was not empty yet, and he could reuse his technique. He wondered what would come first, the countess's bankruptcy or his death. He suggested he check it out if he wanted to. The Black Witch joined them and said that this alliance was not limited to the four of them. She explained to the old man that she would definitely join the battle as well. Hunter Kim Kanja had made a formal agreement with the 5 guilds. The old man was surprised to hear this. The Black Witch then said that Kim had joined all the guilds equally. It followed that if he pointed a weapon at him, it would be the same as him pointing it at them. They wanted to know if the holy sword could really stand up to them all. The old man thought he was in a difficult situation and had a hard choice to make. This was the countermeasure Kim was talking about. Kim asked the rear spirit, remembered what he had told him on the floor. The spirit looked at him and couldn't understand what he was talking about. Kim explained to him that he had said that there were 2 ways to counter a strong enemy. He said that you either had to be powerful enough to single-handedly fell the enemy troops or lead an army. But he knew that a solo player was powerless against a hunter with an allied army. Kim approached the holy sword and offered to talk to him quietly. The old man was surprised at the young man's request. Then Kim explained that he was very confused and he had a question for him. He couldn't understand why he was attacking him. First meeting, but he still sincerely admired the holy sword, Kim realized that the old man still didn't believe him no matter what he told him. The old man still mistook him for an assassin sent by the Black Dragon. The spirit told him that to them he was somewhat suspicious, especially to the old man. In his eyes, he was not a hunter, but a brutal killer. In other words, a spy. The holy sword said that whether it was the outside world or Babylon, it was not 24 hours after he entered the tower that they began to fawn over him, only to have him join their guild, but he refused them and was ready to give them a reason. He told them the true reason for his refusal. He said he did it to prove that in this tower one could easily exist on their own. The holy sword said that unlike the rotten outside world, which was always bound by bloodlines and nationalities, one could be on top of the world with just one sword. He believed that one could only succeed with one's talent and skills, and But what the guild leaders were doing in the meantime, he thought they were no better than the rotten outside world. The Black Witch angrily replied to him that he was judging others without knowing anything. One was so outstanding, that was why he lived alone, but if the old man had reached out to them in advance, many hunters would be alive. The poisonous serpent also lost his temper and shouted at him that he was the only one who didn't come to the floor sweep. And it was the same with the floors too. He said that if the old man had been with them, the damage would have been cut in half. The Countess added that if he had help with the connections outside, there would be less problems with food and the current system would be much more stable. If he thought they were rotten, he was an irresponsible little kid to them. They continued to express to him what they had wanted to say long ago. The Black Witch said that if he was a number, then he could show responsibility appropriate to the number. But suddenly the old man shouted for them to shut up. He had listened enough. He told them that they were already such big children, but still kept crying. That he was nothing to them, and angrily asked them to get out, or else he would clear his path with his sword. The rear spirit was delighted at the old man's words. He said he was his true apprentice. Kim was surprised that the old man wanted to fight here where there was only a man, while the other characters agreed and fought together for the defense of their country. The Black Witch turned to him and said that this conversation didn't concern him in any way and that things were much more serious than he could have imagined. And he understood something. Kim said they were all called hunters, so he asked, why don't they clear the floor first? He didn't see the point in pointing fingers at each other. He didn't think they were any worse than non-player characters. He looked at the holy sword carefully and said they needed help, even though they were just non-player characters. But right now their country was in danger of being destroyed. Kim said that they were here trying their best to be warriors called into the empire. He told them that a warrior was a person who could handle what others couldn't handle. He asked them to focus and deal with the remaining scenes. The Holy Knight, putting her sword away, said that Kim was right, and that she didn't know what bad things Kim could have done to the old man. But she knew for sure that now was not the time to fight each other. She decided to sacrifice one secret of hers for everyone to see. She opened the skill window and everyone saw that she had the lie detector skill. This meant that she was impossible to fool. The Holy Knight said that she had a skill that detected her opponent's lies. She was saying, without exaggeration, that she had reached the rank of deputy guild leader with the help of this particular skill. She directly addressed the Holy Sword and the hunter Kim Kong-ja and said that if they believed her, she could provide them with a guarantee of the truth or falsity of their statement here and now. The Holy Knight said that doubt was a poison that consumed a person and the truth was the antidote. Kim thought this was his perfect chance. She added that it was at least an opportunity for their cooperation on the floor. Came from a skill could be extinguished by another skill. He raised his hand and agreed to take the lie detector so that everyone would know the truth. The Holy Sword said that she was the only one here who had not harmed a single person, and so he too decided to agree and trust her. Then the Holy Knight said that it could be considered that they were both in agreement. She let the Holy Sword ask the question first. She added that she was putting her honor and the reputation of the squad of vigilantes on the line, impartially. The Holy Sword decided to ask the question that had been plaguing him. He said that he had brutally killed over people. He wondered if that was the case, to which Kim with absolute calmness replied that yes. The old man abruptly started shouting that he was the devil and he couldn't understand how they could appoint a murderer. But he wasn't allowed to finish, and the Holy Knight informed him that it was a lie. The Holy Knight explained that Kim had just answered his question positively and his answer was a lie. The old man could not believe it, for he was sure that he was an assassin but he had never killed over a man. The old man looked at him incredulously, and Kim smilingly asked if he had any more questions. The holy knight explained that it was originally a rather strange question. Could one man kill so many people? The holy sword began to accuse the guild heads that they were the ones who raised this young man into a special class assassin. Kim smiled and said that the old man was telling the truth, and he was a special class assassin. But suddenly for the old man it was a lie again. The old man approached her and said that he was mistaken about her, and that he believed that she would judge them honestly. The holy knight stood calmly and answered him that she had clarified from the beginning whether they were willing to believe her or not. The holy knight couldn't believe that just now the old man had decided to retract his words. The holy sword listened to her, carefully fell into a stupor. He didn't know how he should react to those words. The old man turned to him and told him to just wait. He couldn't help but kill at least one person anyway. Kim answered him that he was absolutely right about that, and the holy knight reported that it was true. Kim said that he had killed exactly one, and then the knight reported that it was true. He explained that he had been the first person to try to kill him, and he told them that it was that extremely violent monster killer. The heretic smilingly said that it would have been fine if the assumption about the assassins was true, but alas, they themselves had only met Hunter Kim conjure for the first time yesterday. The rear spirit saw the old man stumped and was shocked that Kim had never once lied to him. The spirit thought he was telling him that you couldn't rely on skill forever. Kim came up to him and told him that he had answered all of his questions and concluded that it looked like they had a mutual misunderstanding. He was happy that it was just a simple misunderstanding. But he had one question, that if the guild heads had not protected him in time, he assumed he would have been dead by now. Kim asked if he wasn't due his apology. The holy knight informed them again that it was the perfect truth, and his comment was completely fair, and informed them that he should have apologized to Kim Kong-ja. Kim saw him start to get angry, and he wondered what would happen next. The old man wouldn't stop accusing him. Even after what the holy knight told him, the old man thought they were all conspiring, telling him the truth. He didn't know if the holy sword, the card of his skill of seeing eye, would reveal himself to explain himself to the others. And under such circumstances, he would give up a little, but he would definitely justify himself to them. The old man, looking at his sword, asked him a question. He was curious about his name. Kim introduced himself, but he didn't know if he would try to kill him to shut him up like the summer spirit did or not. He said that if he really didn't commit these brutal murders of innocent people, and he suddenly fell silent, Kim knew that often when people were proven wrong about something, they would try to justify themselves or begin to suspect others. Spirit was once again demonstrating how bad his nature was. Kim realized that now, through choice, the holy sword itself would determine what kind of person he was. The holy sword hid his sword in its scabbard and asked to be allowed to do it all over again. He bowed his head and apologized sincerely. Kim was shocked when he heard his words. The old man said that he was wrong, he was careless, and carelessly misunderstood everything. Because of that, he carelessly almost killed and get rid of people who deserved to die in the blink of an eye. He had killed in accordance with his faith, but from now on such a thing would never happen again. The old man said that words alone could not atone for his guilt. As an apology, he decided to grant his every wish. Kim thought that instead of killing him, he had admitted he was wrong. He could not believe it. The holy sword informed him that all he could do now was put his life on the line. He asked for the pitiful old man to be forgiven so that he could live and make it to the top of the tower. Kim was amazed that he was easily begging for mercy from an inexperienced hunter. The holy sword's words were rolling around in his head as he begged for forgiveness and admitted that he was wrong, that in the future he wouldn't kill people relying only on his skill. He wanted to live, so he asked to be spared. Kim looked at the holy knight. She informed him that the holy sword was telling the truth. Upon hearing this, Kim bowed to him in return and asked him to teach him the art of swordsmanship. He explained to him that if he asked him for sparring in the future, he would not refuse him and would agree to it. Kim said that he had recently gotten a teacher, but in fact he had no opponent to spar with. Kim thought it was better for him to keep his promise to the rear spirit and appoint a holy swordsman as his partner. It was both beneficial and good for his development. He apologized and asked to begin his request again. He said that he understood that he had the right of him to become his sparring partner, but he was somehow embarrassed by it. Kim explained that it was as if he had suddenly become much taller than him, but he was not that outstanding for that. He was glad that the Holy Sword would stop seeing him as an enemy. He realized that things had almost come to a massacre where many people could die, and he would not want to make himself important and take it all for granted. So as payment, among the things that were most valuable to him, he just wanted the Holy Sword to teach him the art of the sword. Kim thought he would die of shame right now. He couldn't understand how the old man managed to express so calmly everything that was on his mind. The Holy Knight was an absolute shock. He said that all the words Kim said were true, and he wasn't cheating, and wanted the Holy Sword to be his sparring partner. The poisonous serpent was surprised that Kim could have asked for anything he wanted, but he didn't do it, only because he was embarrassed by it. It was quite strange to him. The Black Witch said that seeing only children around stubbornly concerned only with their own gain. It had been a long time since she had seen people like the hunter Kim Kanja. She was very surprised. The heretic was pleased that he had witnessed a sincere forgiveness in circumstances where everyone around him was endlessly competitive. He thought that forgiveness itself was a true miracle. The Countess asked that since they had apologized and everything had ended so well, it turned out that they had wasted thousands of gold on the old man. She was not much upset about it. The Holy Sword suddenly came up to him, took him by the shoulders, and said cheerfully that he was mistaken about such a kind young man. Kim looked at him and was shocked. He had never seen the old man in such a good mood. The old man shook his hand firmly and said that he was willing to be his sparring partner any time of the day or night. He also asked that Kim call him Grandpa Marcus. Holy Sword asked him how old he was. He assumed he wasn't yet, and he said that he had a very kind granddaughter left in the outside world. And if she came into the tower, he would be happy to introduce them. Kim asked him not to introduce them, and he didn't need to. Then the old man got serious. He thought Kim was not interested in his granddaughter. Kim quickly apologized and said he just wasn't interested in the relationship on principle. The rear spirit said that he had warned him that the old man was stubborn. He didn't listen to what others said to him. Mildly, he was so fanatical about something that he completely abstracted himself from the mundane. The Holy Sword asked him not to worry about anything. He would take good care of him from now on. The Holy Sword looked at his clothes and said that they were all shabby, and he decided to start with them and change them. He continued to talk about his clothes. He said he knew a skillful dressmaker, but suddenly he noticed that he was the first to be given an award because he had won first place. There was very little information about conquering the floors. He was quite curious as to what reward awaited him. The system offered him a choice of 2 rewards. He knew that the theme from floor to floor was role-playing, so he had a tough choice of reward. Kim knew that hunters held certain roles in the Aegom Empire and adopted the appropriate skills and reputation, and the conquerors who had made it to the top in the previous scene were given the right to be the first to choose a special role. A list of special roles that he could choose opened up in front of him. There were some controlling roles that were not the least important in the empire. And then Kim thought that before he had only been able to become a guard or something like that. He saw that there was a Demon King award, and he decided to look into it more. He read that this award could take him straight to the floor. But there was one condition. You had to kill all the warriors that were in the top of the list. The poisonous serpent couldn't understand why Kim abruptly stopped talking and started to stare into the void. Kim thought that he could clear all the floors at once by killing everyone who was near him. The system notification asked him to choose one of 2 rewards, but Kim still didn't know which reward to choose. He couldn't kill all the people who got on the floor with him. The rear spirit warned him that it was a trap. He was sure of it and asked him not to choose the Demon King reward. But Kim replied that he realized it was a trap because the summer spirit couldn't choose the Demon King reward. Kim was sure that he definitely chose the Demon King's reward, but then he fiddled around on the floor and not hence. The Demon King's reward was a trap. Everyone looked at him and didn't understand what was happening to him. He had chosen the Demon King side first, and once he realized it was a trap, he died and was reborn again. But Kim thought the offer was very tempting. Kim thought about what it would be like to face the floor boss monster once and die by his hand, but the rear spirit tried to talk him out of that thought. He didn't want him to try that option. He told him to look at him. He was a sword lord, and he had made it to the floor alone and then failed there. He assured him that it was a trap. Cruel to the point of repulsion. The rear spirit explained that with his skills now, he couldn't even kill a top 10 fighter, and if he succeeded, there was no way he could conquer the floor. He wondered how strong the floor boss was. The ghost covered his face with his hands and said that there was no boss monster on the floor. Something more inhuman was there. It was evident that the rear spirit was very worried about Kim not picking the Demon King's reward. It was too early for him to get on the floor. It was the first time Kim had seen the spirit in such a state. He said that he hated to admit it, but he was doing well and asked him to keep going in the same direction. Then he would have no problem mopping up the floor on his own. He told the spirit that he wouldn't have chosen this reward and would have taken the safest route. He wouldn't have taken the reward. He only had to watch how events would have unfolded, but the spirit didn't understand why he didn't take the goddess's reward. Kim replied that sometimes you had to take a step back to move forward. He turned to the others and said that the floor rewards had now popped up in front of him, and that soon they would see them too. The Black Witch said that she was just starting to get bored with this waiting for the quest, and once he'd chosen his reward, things would go on from there, and asked him to take his time. But Kim had already made his choice. Kim informed everyone with absolute certainty that he would not be choosing any reward and was refusing it,